the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good evening. It is Petrie here with you up until 1 o'clock on Thursday morning. Lots to come in the programme tonight and up until then. But of course, at midnight, it's the phone-in. And that is when you get your chance to talk back. And as it's a Wednesday, I thought we'd go. We've had to it was quite a tricky conversation yesterday, wasn't it, on the last show. So I want to ask, because I've noticed recently in the papers that sort of on a once a week, twice a week basis, there's some ridiculous neighbourhood dispute that is being eked out in the press. Some absolutely stupid argument that ends up costing both sets of neighbours almost their entirety of their house. Some of them have to sell up, some of them have got hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of legal bills. These things just seem to escalate and escalate and escalate, and the only winners are, of course, the lawyers. So I want to know why it is that neighbourhood disputes go as far as they do. Because you'd think that at any point someone would just say, look, this has just got to stop. Let's just stop this here. Let's just stop it now. Wheelie bin war, 3-year campaign of bullying about wheelie bins. Moaning about a neighbour's fence backfires as a couple are ordered to rip up their patio and take out their heating. Man's bitter £300,000 4-year battle with a painter neighbour over a 4-foot wide stream. 300 grand. So all of this goes on all the time, and we've all had them. We've all had those neighbours. I could tell you some stories about the neighbour that I've just left behind 3 years ago. Oh God, it's a miracle that I've still got any brain cells left. Honestly, it was just was it 22 years of yeah. Anyway. So I want to hear from you about your neighbourhood disputes. We've all had them. There's no excuse on this. How far did it go? Did you stop it? Were you able to stop it before it cost you hundreds of thousands of pounds? Do give me a call. I'd love to hear your stories on this from midnight. The number you're going to need for that is 0344 499 1000. You can message me as well. Please do. Talk and then your message to 87222. Before that, we have the marvellous Amy Fisher in the studio. She's going to be going through the newspapers for Thursday. James Worley is here as well. He's going to be talking about holiday prices coming up and fines that are paid by parents and all of those things. Also, Vicky Mitzi will be with us, a journalist and broadcaster, talking about podcasts, if that's where you get your peace and your joy from. But before that, it is a story as old as time. Well, at least it goes back to 1947 and partition. And this is the argument, the hatred, the long-standing loathing that stands between India and Pakistan, with, of course, Kashmir right bang smack in the middle, part run by India. The argument over that has been going on as well. So, look, it's not a good situation. There's always trouble brewing there. It seems like there are little fights, little wars, lots of anger, lots of resentment, lots of hatred. It can be calmed down, and it has been calmed down in the past, but these things have a tendency to spread, and also calm heads need to prevail, because both of these countries have nuclear weapons. And look, from the Cuban Missile Crisis, we know how easily things can escalate and how easily a mistake can be made that throws the world into nuclear war. So it is a big situation. It's been brewing for a while. Long-standing tensions between India and Pakistan. They've been escalated after India launched missile strikes against the country. What it said was actually terror groups. And Pakistan administered Kashmir, killing at least 26 people. Islamabad said several locations were attacked and 5 Indian jets downed, something that India has yet to confirm, although wreckage has been seen on at least one aircraft. India has responded, saying that Pakistan is responsible for the death of at least 15 civilians on its border when a terror group went in and killed innocent victims. And India-Pakistan historical seething tensions. Who is going to calm this, and will it be calmed down? Like I said, this is not the first time we've been here, but never take for granted that this kind of seething anger can just dissipate every single time. Well, joining me to discuss this is Dr. Sabir Sinha, who's Director of the South Asia Institute at SOAS University in London. Doctor, it's a real pleasure to have you with me this evening. As I was just saying, look, there's been seething tensions between these two nations for a very long time, and sometimes that does bubble up and it does bubble over. This feels slightly different. Does it to you?
Yes, it does. Yeah, it is. It is, I think, maybe the most serious moment in the last 20 odd years, I would think.
What leads you to believe that this isn't just them shouting at each other? What makes you think this could be very serious?
This is the second episode after 2019, when India basically says that they were attacked by terrorists who were trained in Pakistan or were Pakistanis themselves, and in retaliation for which it has sent very heavy equipment and machinery and weaponry aimed at major Pakistani sort of targets. So in 2019, it was just one small location within Pakistan-administered Kashmir called Balakot. But this time around, it's got 9 sites, and some of these sites are not even in Kashmir. They are basically in the province of Punjab. Some of them are near heavily populated cities like Lahore or Islamabad. So they've gone sort of further in terms of the range of the weaponry that has been fired. And also, it seems to me, when you say seething anger, I think it's really boiling over anger from the Indian side, and that has been boiling over for some time. And if you've ever watched Indian television or followed Indian media or social media, people have been whipped into a kind of a hysteria about this. And of course, no country likes to have had, terrorists come in and attack and massacre 26 people. So I think a lot of people feel that their anger is somehow very righteous. But behind that, I don't think that there is any sort of major voice for peace on either side at the moment. And also, secondly, there's a big appetite for inflicting quite a lot more damage on either side. I can speak particularly for the Indian side, where major politicians have said that they would like to capture all of Kashmir that is under Pakistani control, open exhortations for the Baluchi movement for independence in Pakistan, and also use of water as a weapon, because there are many rivers that flow from India into Pakistan. And there is an Indus Water Treaty from 1962, which no longer is in operation. And the Indian side will sometimes switch off river waters and therefore starve Pakistani villages of water for drinking or irrigation, and then release a lot of water, thereby flooding areas in Pakistan. So this is fairly unconventional from that point of view. So public opinion-wise, the kind of new doctrine of responding to terror attacks by sort of sending massive military, responses, and the use of sort of dissolving treaties that are long-standing treaties despite the tensions between the two countries. So that's sort of all seeming new. And also, I think there is similarly a big appetite for a response from the Pakistani side. So, I mean, the Indians say that if Pakistan does not retaliate, things will not escalate. But I can't see how Pakistan, especially the army, can turn around to its population and say, we are not going to retaliate. And if you again watch Pakistani television, there seems to be a lot of appetite for a much bigger war than what we have seen so far.
It's very interesting, Doctor, listening to the narrative coming from either side on this. You have India pretty much parroting the Israeli playbook, if you like, and we're not attacking civilians, we're attacking terrorist groups. It has a real ring to it. Whereas for Pakistan, there aren't the terror groups in the largely Hindu country of India. So in order for them to return any form of attack, if it were a missile attack or an aircraft attack, then that would be on civilian populations. How will that imbalance play out? I'm talking now really in terms of the narrative. Because we all know civilians get killed. Civilians get killed wherever there is a bomb.
Well, I mean, the Pakistanis claimed yesterday that they had attacked an Indian airbase in the capital of Kashmir, Srinagar, and also that they had attacked another airbase in the Indian state of Punjab. So they're basically saying, yes, you don't have any terror hideouts for us to attack, but we are going to go after your military installations and military capabilities. Now, then obviously then the Indians will come back and say, well, listen, we only attacked your terror infrastructure, so to speak. But now that you've attacked our military infrastructure, we are going to attack your military infrastructure. Yeah. So you can see how a sort of escalation is built into this whole sort of cycle of sort of retribution and attack and retribution and retaliation kind of thing. I mean, to speak of a nuclear conflict, as you said, things can escalate quickly, but I think even the most hawkish of hawks on either side is probably not thinking that far ahead. I think the sort of dilemma is, where do you draw an end to all of this? And I guess for either side, the ideal scenario would be that they get the last jab in, and that's when the fight is called off, and the other side does not get a chance to get a jab back in or something like that.
But that's so depressing, isn't it?
Situation.
That's so depressing to me, that sort of that tit for tat, I want to be the last one to do it, because then that means it's more about ego, it's more about saving face, it's more about appeasing a population than it is about peace or ending a war, and that feels very fragile.
Well, unfortunately, it seems to me that the big sort of lines that used to exist between the army and the political party and the political leadership, the presence of critical voices in the media and journalists who might ask questions, that space has really kind of transformed and it's kind of become one seamless whole thing. So, for example, one of the most hawkish of the Indian television anchors, a man called Shiv Arur, who's otherwise quite sort of adept at beating the drum war for the last 10 or 15 years. He reported yesterday that there were credible Pakistani reports that 3 Indian aircraft had been hit by Pakistani missiles. And I think he got attacked so massively in the next half an hour that he deleted his tweet. Then the venerable Indian newspaper, The Hindu, had a similar kind of a story. And of course, they had to delete the whole story. So the whole thing of even asking simple questions, which I think journalists in a time of war normally do ask, and military establishments normally do corroborate. They sort of say, yes, we took some hits, but then this is what we did as well. But here the narrative is very flat. We took no hits. All the evidence that is coming from Pakistan, and yes, there was a lot of evidence on social media that was coming from sort of video games and the like, or from other conflicts at other times, at other places and things like that. So, and then the Pakistanis are saying, we had no sort of terror infrastructure, you've only hit civilians. I don't think that with that sort of complete polarization of the narrative, where either one is mutually exclusive of the other, it becomes very difficult for there to be a point on which there can be agreement, and based on that, there could be any kind of a progress for talk. So the lack of an anti-war, voice, the lack on either side of a critical media, high degrees of jingoism and militarism, of a sort that reminds us once again of other times and other places. Political leadership that has been ratcheting up the rhetoric, and the desire for capture of territory, which I think was not something that used to be voiced at least that openly, that has been coming particularly from the Indian side, but also from the Pakistani side.
But that is a concern as well, isn't it? That you get a conflation then of reasons why you're at war. There's no given reason. First of all, if it starts with we're going to bomb your terrorist organisations where we can, and their layers because the terrorists came across the border and killed 26 people, and then suddenly that becomes, well, while we're at it, we might as well try and take Kashmir, or we might as well push that back, or that's when there's no clear reason to fight, then every reason is a reason to fight, right?
And there's no end. There is no
There's no end to that.
specified end point.
Yeah.
You've not said once we do that we will stop. I mean, basically, what would victory mean for either side?
Yeah.
Is as I said, it doesn't seem like getting, beyond getting the last jab in, that there is any particular sort of specified point. For example, for India to say once we have destroyed, or once the Pakistanis have, admitted to it, or for the Pakistanis to say once they have shared evidence regarding this and acknowledged the hits that we were able to, mount on them. So, I mean, I think it's that is one really worrying thing, that it is fairly open-ended in the absence of any particularly pre-specified goal. Apart from the fact that it is riding on, I mean, I can see that the Indians feel that having suffered the massacre at the hands of what they call terrorists, a non-response would have been impossible, especially given, Modi's own kind of political image and self-image. I mean, he's often in military paraphernalia and on military paraphernalia, getting photographed and things like that. So that whole strongman, he was already getting trolled and mocked that 13 days have passed and what have you done, and that sort of thing, by even members of his own sort of core support group who were saying, this is not the sort of strong man that we all voted for, and that we need to move further to the right in the direction of people who are even more kind of warlike in their rhetoric and their sort of overall ambition regarding Pakistan. So in the absence of all of that, it becomes open-ended, and wars to be open-ended with an inbuilt logic of escalation is not something that one would wish upon a region. And as I said, I don't really see the nuclear thing in the sort of medium term or even short term kind of horizon. But you can't ignore the fact that
anything
they
can
have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, once you stir up a hornet's nest, anything can happen. It strikes me, looking at the world at the moment, that it almost feels like, because of what's happened with Israel and Gaza and Israel and Iran, that in a sense gives a sense of permission to other countries to behave in the way that they're behaving. If India and Pakistan looking at what Israel has been able to achieve, and now it's talking about ethnically cleansing Gaza. Nobody's really talking about that. They got away with that, it seems, at this point. And then you've got Iran and the bombing. So it's almost the same playbook, dare I say, that they're looking at that and seeing an example of maybe we can do the same.
So I actually differ whether it is. Okay, so what I'll say is that on the Indian side, there is a large public which basically sees themselves in an analogous position. And that is why they support all of what Israel has done to Gaza, including, the killings and the destruction of cities. And in my sort of recollection, at least for the last 15 odd years, in my conversation with people who have been hardcore supporters of Modi, the idea that we should do in Kashmir what Israel has been able to do and get away with in Gaza has been a very popular one. Okay. And of course, during the sort of conflict in Palestine, what you saw was that India was the second largest producer of fake news, amplifying a lot of the vilest kind of propaganda and lies that came out of the Israeli Defense Forces. So there is a sort of a strong desire to firstly compare yourself to Israel and to think of yourself as being in an analogous position. And don't forget, I mean, there's an international kind of an element in all of this, which is that right-wing governments around the world have rallied around the issue, or many countries have rallied around Israel rather than Palestine. In the Indian case, we've had support for Palestine, including in previous BJP governments of Modi's ruling party, that have been wedded to the idea of Palestinian self-determination, two-state solution, and the whole bit. And I think that remains the official Indian position.
Right.
But I think India depends quite a lot on Israel for arms. India relies quite a lot on Israel for intelligence, particularly things like Pegasus and other surveillance instruments. There's some speculation as to whether or not they have the same kinds of ways of locating key members of either so-called terror groups or the Pakistani army and things like that. So it sort of works like that. But I mean, the overall analogy, if the Indians wanted to say that they were completely like the Israelis in relation to Palestine, then by implication, their being in Kashmir would be as illegal as Israel's, being in sort of illegal occupation of Israel has been, of Palestine has been.
It's difficult not
despite
to...
similarities, despite similarities, I think they're far from being identical.
No, but it's hard not to see parallels in play here. Just quickly, before I let you go, the concern, of course, in Britain is that this will spill out onto the British streets, and it wouldn't be the first time that we've seen these two groups fighting it out on Britain's streets. Is that a concern that you would voice?
Yes. I mean, you've seen stuff happen in Leicester and other cities around in the not too distant sort of past. But even if you go back to last week, when there was a demonstration in front of the Pakistani High Commission, where there was a lot of Indian demonstrators, well, a few hundred anyway, and there was the kind of slogan shouting was kind of interesting in the sense that obviously down with Pakistan, etc. is fairly standard, but there was just a lot of just shouting of Modi, 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 and then shouting religious slogans which have unfortunately become associated with the Hindu far right back in India. I think that people live cheek by jowl. I mean, the Asian communities in many places are fairly mixed and things like that in terms of people, not just Hindus and Muslims, but obviously many Muslims are from India as well. I mean, if this was to become a flashpoint, for example, if the situation in front of the Pakistani High Commission had spiraled out of hand, and there was enough, I think, police presence to deal with it, and I think slightly in the Indian side, they might feel a bit aggrieved because there were a couple of arrests and things like that. So again, you'll probably hear about two-tier policing, and is the police on our side or their side? And unfortunately, there is a danger of that. And again, I mean, I think there are probably sane voices in communities that are likely to step in and work together to nip it in the bud. And I hope that, with social media, just removing any territorial sort of limits to the flow of fake news, or in fact for solidarity, it all becomes, 70% of Pakistanis in the UK are from effectively Pakistani Kashmir. So, and they probably have families over there. That's not the majority of the Indian community, which are primarily from Gujarat or other places. So there's a possibility there. There is a big population in the UK of Kashmiri Pakistanis who will be personally affected by this. And I hope that they don't build on the recent bad blood between communities, and that saner voices work together to try to stop this from spiraling onto the streets.
It's fascinating talking to you. Let's talk again soon. I'm sure there'll be reason to. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Sabir Sinha, who's Director of the South Asia Institute at SOAS University in London.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, this is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock. And it's time now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning a weekend away in Munich at the end of May to watch the biggest game in European football, the Champions League final. Now, we're also putting £5,000 in your pocket to spend however you want to spend it.
Win a once-in-a-lifetime trip to watch the Champions League final live. Go to talksport.com/win for your chance to embark on the ultimate odyssey of football ecstasy. With 2 tickets to the Champions League final live at the iconic Munich Football Arena, Germany, including flights, accommodation, and an uber-massive £5,000 in your hand. How about that? Enter online now at talksport.com/win. Terms and conditions apply. Achtung, baby.
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win that VIP trip, simply text the word football to 83338 by the 16th of May, 11 p.m. A text will cost you £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have bill payer's permission. Or you can just send your name and number by post to Champions League Final Comp, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. It must arrive by 5 p.m. on May the 21st.
Fantastic. You don't want to miss out on that. That's from our colleagues at TalkSport, and the best of luck to you. All right. Coming up at midnight is the phone in, and I want to hear all of your stories about your neighbours. There's been so many stories recently, have you noticed, if you read the papers, if you pick up the papers, about these ridiculous neighbourhood disputes that just go on and on and on, and can end up costing people the very homes that they were arguing to defend. Have you ever got into that sort, well, any sort of neighbourhood dispute, and why are they so poisonous? Give me a call, 0344 499 1000. Calls are charged at the national rate. And you can also message me, text the word TALK and then your message to 87222.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good evening. This is Talk and it's Petrie here. And it is time now to catch up on podcasts as we invite Vicky Mitzi, journalist, broadcaster and host of You Didn't Let Me Finish podcast, to tell us what's coming up. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm really sad to not see your pup in the studio tonight.
I know, I'm sorry. He's having to learn to be at home with his big brother dog. Yeah, I know.
Oh, dear.
When I go home, it's chaos.
They are.
It really is chaos.
Beautiful chaos, though.
Oh, it is beautiful chaos. I mean, Humphrey is so naughty. It's unbelievable. But I do love him. He's very funny. Anyway, I shall have to do a podcast about it. Maybe that would be a good idea. Tell me about what you've got for us this
don't
week.
start me off. There have been doggy podcasts. Have you listened to any?
No, not really. I might do now that I've got the naughtiest puppy in the world.
I'll have to. That can be my homework.
Yeah.
Because I'll have to look up whether they're still going, the ones that I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
But you don't know it from BBC London days. You don't remember?
I do remember.
Barking hour.
But yeah,
Do
the
you
barking.
remember?
I do remember. Well, I remember
good.
that happening. Joe Good. Yeah. She's a lovely woman. Absolutely
So
delightful.
good.
Such a
That
sweet
podcast
woman.
was so good.
Yeah.
I wasn't really as into dogs as I am now, but I don't know if it's still going.
I suspect so. I mean, Joe's still there and she's still amazing. So I would imagine so because she loves her dogs.
Yeah. But she's kind of doing glamorous stuff as well now, I think.
She's always been glamorous. She's
Glamorous dogs now. There
glamorous
we go.
dogs. Blimey.
I didn't think we'd be starting off like this.
No, it's good. I mean, the barking hour is brilliant. So we might as well plug it. There you go. If it's still going, let us know.
Yeah, I will, because I'll see whether there are any other doggy poddies out there for us to listen to as well. But from that to Rob Brydon
Yes.
and Brydon and his podcast. If you like him, you'll like it. I thought it was a nice one to ease us back into the pod review because it does what it says on the tin. Funny people, nostalgia, Julian Clary, telling us all about his kind of camp gags and all that.
I mean, I do like Rob Brydon. I do. I think he's very funny. He does a marvellous impersonation of somebody stuck in a box with this tiny little voice. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And some of his impersonations are just absolutely bang on. I think Ronnie Corbett is brilliant. He's just really good. Anyway, listen, I've got a clip of Rob Brydon chatting with Julian Clary about one of his comedy influences being Shut That Door, Larry Grayson.
Remember the way he would stand on stage and just talk
about nothing.
Yes, seemingly nothing.
Yes, seemingly nothing. And I aspire to that, where you come on and you just say, you keep interrupting yourself, and you keep digressing. I like to do a bit of that. And so you're telling a story about what he was, the sort of arc of it would be what happened on his way to the theatre. But along the way, he's constantly digressing, and it's all about nothing, and it's about how he shouldn't be here because he's not well, and he's had it all down here, and whatever.
You heard the story about Shut That Door. I heard he was on stage in a club or a theatre, and there genuinely was a draft that came along, and he went, shut that door, and it got a laugh. So he tries it again, and it becomes this thing that you could never write.
Well, it's that whole thing about what's going on in the wings as well, which is always funny.
Yeah.
I have a thing about Birth of the Lesbian in the Wings and what she's doing. She's dismantling her motorbike and when you put that pipe out and that sort of, it's probably derived from that same thing of Larry Grayson.
Two absolutely brilliant men there. Love that.
Two segues as well. As I was listening to him there, he is Joe Good's celebrity friend, and she says she only has one celebrity friend, and that's him.
Oh, really?
How funny. And the Birth of the Lesbian sketch with her. I'm not massively into Julian Clary. I just happen to know this. That he brings his doggy along when he works.
Oh, does he?
Do you know that?
I think everyone should bring their dog to work, although my team wouldn't agree with you because...
No, with a puppy, I think. How did it go when...
Well, let's just say I owe a few favours. Let's just put it that way.
Did you lose any chair legs?
It's worse. But anyway, we'll leave that there. Talk me through the Blind Boy podcast.
Do you know of this artist, the Blind Boy?
No.
It's the Blind Boy podcast. Let me get this right, because he is the Blind Boy Club, and he's an Irish artist. It all gets very surreal because he's an artist, but he is also like a socio-economic commentator as well. And I didn't know this. I came across it and I thought, who is that person with a plastic bag around his face? And it turns out that this is his artistic movement, and it's from Rob Brydon to this. I had to bring them both just to prove that I bring you from one to the other and a whole mixed bag. It's surreal, to say the least. It's interesting. I'd like you to listen to it. I'd really like to know what you think. Or you, Petrie.
Yeah. I mean, so he's not actually blind.
No,
he just puts a bag around his...
It's the name of his Blind Boy Boat Club is what he's called, and it's the Blind Boy podcast. But what I found interesting is that I took to it because I listened to it and I dropped it from the review because I thought it was too far out. And then I went and looked him up and thought, this is a movement that I've discovered, and I was really proud of myself discovering this kind of massive social movement. He's just got hundreds of thousands of followers and listeners, millions of listeners, and it's partly because it creates pictures with audio, and I've always found that the elusive thing to do with radio. Radio podcast, the same thing.
Same thing. Well,
he's talking to us about the seagulls on the roof of his office, that it's a revenge and it's a conspiracy. He goes right, and his dad and mythical Irish and lots of Irish tradition and fairies, but it's kind of really sound and really together. It's very interesting.
Well, I've got a clip of that as well. This clip from Blind Boy, he's talking about the band that's been in the press a lot recently, Kneecap.
I'm doing an impromptu podcast this week because lots of people have been asking me to speak about the band Kneecap, who have been all over the news and are currently under investigation from the UK counter-terrorism unit, which is ridiculous. It is outrageous. So I signed a statement basically saying that this was outrageous. Myself and other artists, Kneecap asked me to sign it, but myself and Christy Moore, Fontaines DC, Kojak Lankham, Mary Wallopers, the Pogues, Massive Attack, Paul Weller, people with their heads screwed on, signed this statement, not just in defence of Kneecap, but in defence of art and democracy, because this is political censorship and intimidation, political intimidation. This is actual cancel culture.
Wow, that is interesting. He's referring there to Kneecap writing some words in a song, isn't he? There, Vicky, that the institutions didn't like very much.
That sounds quite heavy, but there is a lighter side to it, where some of the times you're kind of scratching your head thinking, where's he going with this? And then other times it's poetry with pictures and words, and it's, actually talking about, it's funny, he's talking about that there's a place in Limerick where the starlings have gone just overboard with starling bird poo, and he's been responsible, he's saying, for interacting with the council about this street where they've built a starling figurine and a kind of sculpture, and he's really pro that. But it dances in and out of quite tight politics at the same time as him talking about the movement of the starlings coming to visit, and he says he said they should be arriving in just under 2 weeks, and it leaves you thinking, is this true, or is him? What's the word for a flock of starlings?
I don't know.
It's just beautiful, kind of. He is an artist in his describing.
He's got an absolutely beautiful voice. I must say that.
It takes you to another kind of dimension a bit.
Yeah, it's very nice. Lucky Boy, this is your third pick.
Yes. So. From Blind Boy to Lucky Boy, this is a bit more of a serious investigative stuff. I didn't put any true crime in this week, so I knew that this would be lacking for you, but I thought I would add in this Tortoise Investigates piece from Tortoise Media, who were responsible for the Sweet Bobby podcast as well. I don't know if you've heard
I love Tortoise Media. I think they're great. I think their whole principle is brilliant. Yeah.
Well, they find nuggets as well. And this story, Lucky Boy Gareth, his whole life has been defined by a relationship which happened 35 years ago. As a 14-year-old schoolboy, Gareth fell in love with an attractive young teacher. She was 27, but they did sleep together, according to him. And this is his quest for not only, it's not really a revenge quest, it's kind of softer than that. He's very emotionally involved, but this kind of, very deep voiced man now is trying to unravel this, find witnesses and bring his case. And I won't say more than that, because some of it goes well and some of it in a taboo subject, because they bring the element of the fact that it's a boy being abused by a female teacher, and she wasn't very attractive, and it's examining the elements of abuse that are quite taboo, because it comes Chloe Hadjimatheou, the reporter, has got the story from a friend of hers who went to school with Gareth. So it's come through like that, and it opens up nicely with her having this kind of discourse with her friend and about...
Yeah, because in a lot of cases, these young boys are called, oh, you're so lucky that she was such a gorgeous teacher.
Exactly.
And yet it is still abuse. Let's listen to a clip. Lucky Boy.
Because I remember being at school at this time and there being all these rumours, and we all kind of knew that something was going on, but we didn't know for sure, mostly because...
The rumours were about what happened between this guy Gareth and a teacher at the school. His wife is calling Mark because Gareth needs witnesses, and he remembers Mark because they were both misfits.
You either did well in your exams at Christ College, or they weren't interested.
They just wrote you off?
They wrote you off completely. I mean, they wrote me off completely, and they wrote him off completely.
Mark and Gareth end up having several long conversations, sometimes late into the night, rewinding to the 1980s and playing out their school days. Memories of that sweet time in the early years when they were still blank slates. And then they talk about the real reason they were having this call, what happened between Gareth and this teacher at Christ's College.
Very interesting. It seems like it's been very nicely put together, Vicky.
Yeah, it's not going to be slapdash with them doing it. It was really sad when Chloe was talking to some 14-year-old boys, and that's sort of, there are sections weaved in nicely, and when that flows seamlessly, it's good listening. And she said that he's quietly admitted, one of these boys, that he's still playing with Lego, and it's just quite strong.
Wow, that's really strong imagery, isn't it? Oh, they sound good. Really good mix there, Vicky. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
I'll send you a picture of the puppy chewing his bed. So there you go. That's what he's decided to do now. Vicky Mitzi, thank you, journalist, broadcaster and host of You Didn't Let Me Finish podcast. Stay where you are. We're going to be talking to James Worley next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, this is Talk, and just a reminder that coming up at the top of the hour, Amy Fisher will be here to go through the newspapers for tomorrow. But first, look, we might just have got over the Easter holiday, and I know for a lot of parents you're now thinking, thank goodness the kids are going to school, but it won't be long, will it? It never is. I remember it well. Until the summer holidays, and then that long, long, long time of what on earth are you going to do with the kids? Well, taking them away is proving to be more expensive, as we've always known. Well, James Worley is here now, broadcast journalist and host of the Ultimate Road Trip podcast. So, James, it's the perennial question. It always has been about school holidays, and the price is going skyrocket.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, Petrie, the perennial problem. It's 30% is kind of the average, or can be the top increase that travel operators and tour operators put onto the costs of holidays during the summer and during half term and Easter and Christmas. And as you say, it's becoming a real problem, and it's more of a problem with parents taking their kids out of school during term time as well. That's kind of making it a real issue for tour operators, parents and the government as well. Apparently now 20% of children are classed as being permanently absent. Persistently is the right word, persistently absent of 10% of their time at school, opposed to 10% pre-COVID. So COVID really exacerbated the problem, and it's really an issue now with parents being fined for kids' absences. So we'll start with this issue, whereas the government recently, get my statistics right, first offence in England, £80 fine per parent per child. That rises to 106. Yes, that rises to £160 if not paid within 21 days, and then it can get worse with some prosecutions. Scotland, £1,000 for your first offence. Wales and Northern Ireland don't have any fines at the moment. So parents are trying to find ways of avoiding paying these sometimes exorbitant prices you can find during holiday time. I mean, I had a quick check with Ryanair going to half term in May. It's very close, so prices are going to be up, aren't they? But £400 per person on Ryanair to Malaga out of Stansted for this half term coming, May half term, as opposed to £80 return the week after. So £80 or £400. So
wow.
Parents are going to think, right, let's take our kids out a week later maybe and try and save money. And then summer, again, as premium, as you say, it's 8 weeks of time to fill. And we want to get away. England's weather's generally, we've had some nice summers over the past few years, haven't we? But, getting away to the sun and the beach and guaranteed sun, we want to try and treat the kids. And it's a real issue. Summer sometimes 30-40% higher than the rest of the year. There are ways we can mitigate that. We'll go through that in a second. But as you say, parents are being fined now, and it's we need some joined up thinking. ABTA recently said that we need a longer term solution to this problem, fundamentally addressing the issues. We can try and stagger school holidays perhaps to try and make sure that kids aren't on holiday all at the same time. And it does happen, of course. Different counties in England have different holidays. Scotland, they finish their holidays mid-August, I think, and they say Germany has a very good system across the different states in Germany. They have completely different holiday times, so they're doing something to address it. And I know that Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, and Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, are looking to try and get some joined up thinking, speaking to the tour operators and trying to come to a solution.
Yeah, because it's you know, it's all very well. You know, we know that it's supply and demand, right? It's as simple as that. These are businesses; they're going to make money, and when there are more people who want to go on holiday, they charge more money for it. It's just as simple as that. But of course, there's also profiteering done. I mean, don't tell me there isn't, because they know that it's not just about supply and demand. And in a lot of cases, you look at £80 per child per parent. That's going to be cheaper to pay the fine than it is to pay the holiday increases, except in Scotland, £1,000 is too much. But you would go, I'm just going to take that.
Yeah, you could take it on ahead, and there are there's you know, quite a few case studies where parents have taken their kids out and said they'll take the hit, and they still come away. You know, they go to I think it was on a trip to Orlando, to Disneyland, you know, once in a lifetime trip for the kids, and they came away £3,000 up. You know, or they say
It's a no-brainer, isn't it? I mean, and also it's not helped by the fact, and I remember this very well, that the last week of school is just watching movies, colouring in and doing nothing. They're not actually learning. We know that. The teachers have given up by then. Everybody's given up by then, and a lot of the parents just go, well, you know, what are they missing anyway? Yeah, and COVID really has exacerbated the problem with. I think it was 443,000 penalty notices over the past year given out to parents. So it's happening. We know that. Manchester, another statistic for you. Manchester parents, Mancunian parents, fined 1.4 million over the past 3 years. So, you know, it's not fixing, as Abto said. Who gets the fine? Do we know?
Who gets the fine?
Yeah, where does it go? Where does the money go? That's a lot of people, isn't it?
A lot of coffers are being filled.
Yeah, a lot of biscuits for the staff room, I would suggest. You know,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, Abta have said, you know, that these fines aren't fixing the problem. You know, that the issue might be getting, I think, year on year from last year, absences are slightly down, but it's still well above pre-COVID levels. So something's got to be done. The fines aren't working. It's a bit of a blunt instrument, as
it really is.
So the trick is to find ways of getting on holiday, you know.
And what are the tricks? What are the tricks that people can think of?
Well, book well in advance is the obvious advice. If you go to a place 1 year, you like the accommodation, book it that same year. I know I've got a family friend, she books the same accommodation before she's left that year. If she goes to the same place in Portugal, you know, it's a family-run place, and so she just books it, and the prices are low. Free kids places, lots of big tour operators, amongst others. There are other tour operators available. TUI and Jet2 offer free kids places for every 2 parents, for every 2 adults are going. Stagger the times you're going. You know, in summer, the last 2 weeks in August traditionally are cheaper because they've got all these tour operators. They buy up their packages, especially you know, their package holidays well in advance. You get up to a year or more in advance. They've got to get rid of all these holiday places, these airline seats and hotel rooms. So they are going to offer discounts potentially towards the end of summer. And also think of going from different airports. With Scotland being on holiday or being back to school even mid-August to end of August, if you live in Newcastle or Northern England, perhaps, you know, go up to Glasgow or Edinburgh where flights might be cheaper because all the kids are back on in school. So that might be a way of doing it. If you live in the Midlands, you know, you've got Bristol, Birmingham, East Midlands airports to choose from. Again, counties, some of that's a different case. Everybody in England at the same time has some of their summer holidays. But yeah, choose a different airport if you're going away at half term, because I know half terms are staggered, you know.
Yeah, sometimes they can be a little bit different, can't they? Yeah, exactly.
All-inclusive, kids eat a lot. My children, my 2, eat a lot, and all-inclusives have become far more popular, kind of far more, not upmarket, but I think far more people are willing to look into the all-inclusive option because, you know, kids can just eat all they can, drink all they can, all the soft drinks and ice cream on the beach, and all the activities included. Just get out of the. If you're going to all inclusive, I worked in an all inclusive years ago. I taught sailing in Jamaica, believe it or not, in my second or third year of uni, and all the families who come, I said, go out of the hotel, see the real. Real life outside the complexes. Don't just stay in the complex. But anyway, all inclusive, I think, is a great way to go, and go more unusual destinations. Instead of Spain, go to Turkey. Turkey last year was a big, really popular, as a really popular place for families, as opposed to Spain and Portugal. And there are other things you can do. Take your own car seats. Lots of airlines will take car seats for free. These big pieces of luggage that you think, I'm going to have to pay for that. No, generally not. Even the low-cost airlines will take your car seat for free, and what the quality is like. If you go abroad and you hire a car seat, you don't know what state it's going to be in, especially if you've got a really small child, or and you want a peace of mind. So that's one way of saving. Sometimes 150, 200 pounds for the week if you're hiring a car.
Yeah.
So there are lots of little things you can do.
Yeah, or go to America, because they're not getting any tourists. So
very true. Very true.
Be nice and cheap if you don't mind being sent to El Salvador. Just
Yes.
very quickly, I just want to mention this because we've only got a minute left. Airlines are continuing to avoid Pakistan's airbase, and there is government advice not to go within 10 kilometres of the main cities in Pakistan. Is that right?
Yes, that's what I've read. I mean, it's obviously follow the Foreign Office guidelines in regards to travel there and India, but of course it's impacting long-haul flights. A lot of the airlines are avoiding the area, obviously avoiding Pakistani airspace, but with Russian and Ukrainian airspace already being closed, if you look on flight radar websites, there's a huge kind of line of planes going just south of the Black Sea and over the Arabian Gulf, just avoiding Russia and Pakistan. So you might have some delayed flights or maybe cancel flights. So check before you travel if you're going to Southeast Asia or India. Some delays of up to 2 hours in some cases I've seen.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. James Morley there, broadcast journalist and host of the Ultimate Road Trip podcast. Coming up is the papers. Stay where you are.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is talk.
Hello there, this is Petrie with you, and with me is the fabulous Amy Fisher, former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party. Hello.
Hello, very nice to see you again.
See you. Now, before we get to the papers, Neighbours, not the TV show, although I can sing it in my head now, I said it.
Same, I haven't watched it for 20, 30 years, and
I've now got the
immediately the theme tune came back.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's going to be with you all night. Why is it that these neighbour disputes, because I've noticed a lot recently in the papers, they seem to just explode into hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of legal bills, and people even have to sell their houses in order to pay because they were hacked off about a fence or
well, the classic is that somebody's planted like Leylandii, the trees that sort of grow to be 20 foot high. It feels like sort of every week there's something like that in the Daily Mail.
Why does this get so intense, do you think?
Well, I think it's people's innate sort of wanting to kind of win in some way, and if it's something you quite literally are engaged in on a daily basis because they are your neighbours, you sort of can't quite, it's a scab that you don't stop picking because you can't, it's literally there in your face, over the fence, over the badly planted Leylandii or the car that's in the wrong kind of parking spot, and you can't get away from it. There's no sort of, I'll just take a breath and walk away because you can't, because it's literally literally next door.
Yeah, my old next door neighbour was a real pain, and she would be calling the council all the time and the police all the time on everything and anything, and she had what she thought was her parking space because it was directly outside her door, and it was a mews, so it was quite limited,
quite tight
parking anyway, and very tight roads and everything. But she used to put out cones when and I would always remove them. And actually, we got to the stage where I'd be so petty that as soon as she drove her car out, I would go and park in her space.
So you've just hit upon absolutely something I was thinking about when I was sat outside, having heard you sort of talking about these neighbourly disputes. Is I know this is going to make me sound like a terrible person, but you've sort of just...
I've sort of admitted I am.
But certainly, I had one particular flatmate once, sort of a long time ago now, but it got to the point where I would do things just because I knew they irritated him. Like I would just, and it was so petty, like I would just leave his post in like a slightly different place to where we didn't put the post. Like that kind of level of like, not really malicious and actually kind of tiny, and certainly not anything, harmful in the grand scheme of things, but I did it because I knew it would irritated. We got to that level where we were both just sort of playing these like sort of slightly weird and slightly sort of rubbish mind games with each other to no real purpose, as I say, because we hadn't had an argument or a falling out. It was just, sometimes he wouldn't kind of stick to the cleaning route or whatever. And there'd just be these niggles. And as I say, it then got to the point where I would just do these very small things for the sole purpose of just knowing it would slightly get under his skin that, random Tuesday morning. And he would do the same back to me. So actually, and that was when I was in my, sort of 20s, and like I say, in a kind of flat share. But that is just a small kind of microcosm of, then you can kind of see how it escalates when you're living next door to each other, and as you say, it becomes these, court battles costing tens of thousands of pounds, and just escalates beyond kind of all reasonable understanding. But I think you can get so far down a path you don't even realise yourself how irrational and consuming your own, by this stage, frankly, bonkers behaviour has become about yours particularly, but about a parking space or about a hedge.
This particular neighbour, and I've moved, I'm not very far away, but I'm not scared of her anymore. No, I wasn't scared of her then, but she had beef with everybody in the mews. Like I said, it was very small, so there weren't that many houses. I was there for 23 years.
Okay.
And on my very first day of moving in, and I had a small child, it was just me and the small child moving in, and she sort of stuck her head through the door and said, I was going to do an impersonation of them, but that would be cruel. I'm your neighbour. I hope you're not going to take these carpets up, because it will make noise. These were houses. I had a house next to her house. And I said,
That's a really baffling way to welcome somebody.
The very first thing she said to me.
To welcome somebody to kind of the neighbourhood.
I mean, you're not going to take those carpets out, in that sort of voice. And I said, I'm sorry, both me and my son have got a terrible asthma, so that everything's is going. Of course, over the 23 years, she'll have seen me smoking fags in the back garden. But anyway, that's beside the point. I don't smoke anymore.
Weren't you immediately tempted to buy a drum kit as well?
Yeah. Well, the next thing she did was a couple of days later. I was painting my front door. I wanted a bright Barbie pink, and actually I'd got a pale pink, and I wasn't very happy with it, but I used it as an undercoat. And she went, "Oh, I hope you're not going to leave that pink," because I swear this is the second day. "I hope you're not going to leave that pink because, people from the street will be able to see your house and it'll encourage thieves to come down." I was like, "What? Oh, I should have moved immediately," but I'd literally just bought the place. And so I went out and got the brightest, Barbiest, pinkest, pink.
There you go, because you were already triggered to do something, at least in part, just because you knew it was going to get under her skin.
Yeah, so I painted it the brightest pink ever. And that shut her up about that, because I thought that next time I'll just paint the house pink. I mean, I just don't care at this stage. And that was day 2.
Yeah, well, how you managed to last another 22
years.
22 years.
She used to break into my garden and literally the back garden and cut all my plants down.
Oh, that's criminal.
She used to take the panel down. It is criminal.
But that's actually crossed the line from being,
just annoying,
nosy and annoying and offering her opinion when it's certainly not needed or wanted, or doing these small niggly things to sort of irritate you. But that's actually trespass and criminal damage at that point.
I came home from a holiday once. Looked out in my garden and I had this beautiful sort of ivy and jasmine and everything climbing over things. All gone. All cut back.
Did you ever challenge her about?
Yes, I did. I said, "What the hell has happened in my garden?" And she said, "Oh, because she used to take one of the panels off the fences and just come into my garden."
This is really, as I say, this is so cross the line into being quite creepy. Not quite creepy, very
and
creepy.
I thought I was helping you, and I said, "I tell you what, next time you're thinking of helping me, don't. Just don't, because you've ruined my garden. I loved it the way it was." And then again, a few months later, I came home and there was a builder in my garden.
No, this is so disturbing.
And, I swear to God, I swear on my dogs, both of their lives, this is absolutely true. And I went, "Excuse me, mate, what exactly are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I've been, the woman next door asked me to put in a concrete support beam for the fence." And I said, "What, in my garden? A lovely, pretty, you know how gorgeous they look, concrete beam? No, take it out, put it back to the way it was." Well, she said it was okay. I said, "It's not her garden." And then again, I had to go to her and say, "Look, this is it now. I will be calling the police and the lawyer."
I was about to say, I think you've been very patient. I think after the first incidents of finding that somebody was creeping into my garden through a panel in the fence.
Yeah.
No, that would be the point at which I was sort of doing something more than just having a few stern words with her.
It was impossible. She would call the police. If my son, when he got a bit older, was at home with a couple of mates on a, Friday evening at about 7:30 playing music, and because the windows were open, they could hear. It wasn't like it was boom, boom music. And the police would turn up and go, "Why are we here? They're not doing anything wrong. Why have you called the police?" Well, they were making noise. Well, they're 3, 14, 15-year-old boys
playing the guitar. I mean,
who were singing along to a song with the window open. So, but that's who she was.
So, who left before who?
I moved first.
Okay, so she might still be there.
She's probably still there.
Terrorising
She
whoever
might even
is
be listening. Hello. I don't care. She made everybody's life hell. So I mean, it wasn't just me. But that's just a handful of the stories over the 22 years.
But you've made me think of that awful scene in The Shining where Jack Nicholson is trying to break through the wooden door. That's what you've made me think of, describing her coming into your garden.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, she used to take the fence down until I had it completely replaced, and then she called the council on me. Anyway, that's another story. But yeah, so neighbours. I certainly have had a neighbour from. I mean, I spent most of the time just ignoring her, but it was quite difficult when she.
Well, it becomes wearing, doesn't it? Because as I say, you can't get away from them because they're literally next door, and it's, that can be very difficult and very stressful.
I think for the last 2 or 3 years we were there, I had to say to her at one point, because she, again, a friend of my son's was waiting for him in the mews, and he's a big black guy. He looked a lot older than he was. Really sweet boy called Sammy. He was probably a bit of a wrong one, to be honest, but he was always lovely and polite to me. And I'd seen him standing out in the mews, and I went out and I said, Sammy, do you want to come in? And he was like, no, it's all right. It's all right, I'll wait here. I'll just wait. My son was having a shower. He was always late for everything. So he said, I'll just wait here. I've got a couple of calls to make. And I said, OK, fine, that's no problem. Carried on pottering around and then looked out the window again and saw the police there.
Oh, well, I mean...
and I went out and I said, I'm sorry, what's going on here? You know, is he dangerously black?
I was about to say, well, that's what that is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was purely...
She was a terrible person.
Purely a race.
Yeah, terrible person. And so I just stood there, and while they said, well, we're going to search him anyway, and I'm like, well, I need your badge numbers, put your camera on, you know, and poor Sam was going, oh, this is all right, this happens to me all the time.
Oh, my God.
Which is even worse.
Depressing.
And I just said, well, she's a horrible racist. So I mean, it was just awful. And I said to her, don't ever talk to me or even look at me again. That's it. That's all. Because I felt quite sorry for her, to be honest with you. But I just said don't. And so I had a very peaceful final couple of years. Very nice.
Well, as I say, I think you sort of showed far more patience than, well, certainly I would have done.
Yeah, maybe I should be sainted. I'll have a word with the new Pope.
We're talking about some degree of sainthood and then being quite patient. I mean, Petrie, I think there's a sort of
come on, if you'd met her.
There's a sort of sliding scale here.
Honestly, if you met her, you would want me sainted. I'm telling you. The fact that she wasn't buried in that garden of mine is an absolute miracle. Right, before we go, move on, before we go on to the UK papers, let's have a look at the Minnesota Star Tribune, which is our pick for today. Court lets Trump ban trans troops. So this is a Supreme Court has allowed Trump this ban on transgender people in the military, but there are still legal challenges ahead. What do you make of this?
So look, on the one hand, I'm sure Trump supporters will be very pleased because, you know, Trump did say that he was going to do this, and he has. What I was struck by when I was reading this copy in the Minnesota Star, you know, and obviously the issue of trans people serving in the armed forces, because actually it's a question that gets raised in the UK, you know, here in the UK as well, is obviously quite a complex one, which I'm not quite sure I want to jump straight into. No. Above and beyond just saying that my reaction when I read this copy, it was just the Trump administration it doesn't itself seem to be bothering with any of those niceties and actually some of the very complex issues in around this. Because if we look at the quote, Hegseth, who is the US Defense Secretary, is sort of welcoming this decision, saying no more pronouns. He told a Special Operations Forces conference in Tampa, no more dudes in dresses. I mean, that feels like a very... whatever, as I say, the actual complexities of having trans people in the US Armed Forces, you know,
which might be in terms of billeting, and it might be in terms
of moving in close. So this is what I mean: is there are levels of complexity to this. But my point is the way the US Defense Secretary has chosen to come up it by talking about dudes in dresses, just it feels.
Well, the whole administration, though, is the language they're using is just
But it's
very
about
odd.
everything, and in this case, it happens to be about transgender people and
willing
rights,
to die for their country.
And in the US, but that sort of no more dudes in dresses pretty much sums up the Trump administration's approach to everything.
Yeah.
It happens, as I say, in this case, to be about transgender people in, you know, serving in the military. But actually, no, that's just the way they sort
it's
of.
It's just a horrible way they talk about everyone.
Pejorative, without any subtlety or empathy or any understanding for anybody who isn't a Trump supporter, frankly. As I say, on any number of issues, not least this one, which happens to be leading the Minnesota Star Tribune today.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is, like I just said, these are soldiers who are prepared to lay down their lives for their country. Donald Trump dodged the draft 5 times, and no matter what they think of trans soldiers and how difficult that might be to administer that is something that they would do well to remember, because Hegseth doesn't exactly have a glorious military career
I mean, I wasn't
either.
sure whether, you know, that was going to be touched on. I mean, so look, he did serve in the National Guard, I think it was, and did tutors in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Wasn't he loading and unloading lorries though? Or
Well,
something?
it was unclear as to exactly what he was doing on those tours, and also, I mean, the guy's had some not very pleasant accusations about his personal conduct. Okay, so this is the thing about his personal conduct and alleged sexual assault and harassment, right? So that is this chap's background, the US Defence Secretary's background, and yet at the same time, again in the Minnesota Star Tribune, sort of talks about we don't really want trans people in the military because transgender service members conflicts with a soldier's commitment to an honourable, truthful and disciplined lifestyle. Well, you know, this is a
What's
bit...
honourable about the
Thank you.
34th felon as well, that is the president at the moment?
Thank you very
and
much. So
himself.
talk about, you know...
this is what annoys me, is that...
rank hypocrisy, rank hypocrisy of it, just, you know, sat very ill with me, as I say, without getting into the many complexities about trans people being in the armed forces. Just the Trump administration's approach to it just stuck in my craw.
Yeah, it sucks, doesn't it? What about the meeting, the Mark Carney, the newly elected Prime Minister of Canada, and Donald Trump in the Oval Office yesterday? I honestly think he's not well, Donald Trump. I mean, he was weaving all over the place, and Mark Carney was the grown-up in the room, and I couldn't believe it, actually. Mark Carney at one point looked like...
Just confused.
Just shut up, what are you talking about?
And just a bit like...
And don't never say never. It's like, Donald, you've been told.
No, and sort of the thing, Mark Carney is like a serious person.
Serious.
You know, and obviously, sort of probably most well, prior to obviously becoming, you know, within the election, probably most well known in the UK, having been governor of the Bank of England, right as we were, you know, coming out of the sort of awful economic sort of implosion from sort of 2010 onward. And yeah, it was just that stark contrast between Mark Carney, this is a serious man, delivering serious messages, against this guy who, a few days ago, posted a meme or whatever, a sort of mock-up of himself as the Pope. I mean...
And then denied any knowledge of it, even though it was from his personal account.
Exactly, even as it was on his own account. And, you know, we just sort of were just discussing off air just before we started that, you know, for levels of bafflement as I was watching it, it was sort of up there with, you know, the infamous Zelensky going to speak to Trump and just sort of being berated about, you know, kind of not wearing a suit. And
it's just disrespectful. He was disrespectful to Carney.
Yes.
He was disrespectful to the Canadians. You know, we don't want Canadian this, we don't want... And literally sitting in front of Mark Carney. And these are supposed to be trade negotiations they're going to have privately.
And closest partners and all of this kind of thing. And so
extraordinary behaviour.
It's sort of to your point as to either Trump doesn't realise how he's coming across and how this is not the way...
He doesn't look like the strong man.
Not the way you conduct diplomatic relations with other serious people. Either he doesn't realise that, or he does and he doesn't care, and neither of those two... I mean, one of those two options must be true, and both are horrifying, that that's the way the President-elect of the United States would act.
I mean, you know, Carney made it very clear it's not for sale, never, never, ever. And then Trump said, never say never. And it's just like, why are you goading people? Just shut up. But I think that we'll see a much tougher Mark Carney. Mark Carney's got to play the play Trump. Everybody knows they've got to play him in a certain way, but eventually they will tire of that. They will tire of treating him like a toddler and just get on with the business. Just very quickly before we go to a break, fewer kindergarten kids are fully vaccinated against measles. Minnesota Department of Health data shows, falling well short of the 95% herd immunity. That's really scary, isn't it?
Well, it's been a problem here for about the last 10 years, actually, with the wildly... Because obviously we had that scare that MMR caused autism, and actually then that was found to be a rumour that went all sort of out of bonkers, but does now mean we have a cohort of children, if not two cohorts.
But we've got RFK in America, and they've got the biggest outbreak of measles, which is killing children.
Yes, and
healthy children.
Yes.
And yet now they're saying in Minnesota it's spread there too now, that the idea of
and
not,
it's
not
fair.
being
And once
vaccinated.
that genie is out the bottle of not having that 95% herd immunity, it's actually very difficult to get it, you know, back again. It needs to be cohorts of children every year maintained at that level to give you that. You can't suddenly sort of turn the tap on again next year and it goes back to that you know, high level of
we'd almost
immunisation.
eradicated
Yes, we had, and now it's
measles,
it's
and it's back now. Yeah, we had almost eradicated it completely. That was going to be a massive moment to get rid of measles. Right, let's take a quick break, and Amy and I will be back in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk, and it's Petrie here and Amy Fisher, former Director of Communications at the Conservative Party. Let's have a look at the front page. It's hardly surprising, I would say, that the first couple that we're going to pick up for Thursday is VE Day, the 8th. It was celebrated on Monday, but because that was a bank holiday, but that's supposedly 4 days, but this is the day, so the 8th of May. So the Daily Express has colorised a rather beautiful picture there. Maureen Jenkins, left, now 81 years old, she's a toddler, 3 years old there, I would say, recalls proudly waving the Union flag with friend Janine Levy amid the London rubble during the nation's celebrations on May the 8th, 1945. And they've got many, many pages and a final pull-out, a collectible pull-out in the Daily Express. Britain remembers the VE Day spirit 80 years on. It's a gorgeous picture.
It is. It is lovely, and obviously you've got the sort of, you know, the dichotomy, the contrast between, you know, the little girl on the right looking so sort of cheerful and with her flag, and then obviously, but she's standing amidst, as it says, just the absolute rubble of, you know, London having been absolutely decimated, and then obviously, you know, once peace came, there was the whole country to be rebuilt, both physically in terms of the rubble, but
when
also,
you look at those two little girls as well, war is all they would have known.
Yes, exactly.
They were born into war, and you know, they would have been bombs fly if they're standing amongst rubble.
That would have been the normality. And then even coming out of it, obviously, you know, there was rationing this country into the mid 50s or something. So,
a long
time. As wonderful as, you know, peace coming on this day was, suddenly life didn't become rosy, sunny
immediately.
Uplands. Obviously, it took many years to recover, and then obviously, you know, with it being 80 years on Thursday, you know, one is once again reminded that obviously with the passage of time, the number of people who sort of remember the war in any way, who have a living memory of it, you know, dwindles every year as we move further past it. And then, you know, in some ways, I don't want to sound too depressing, but what that does to, you know, history repeating itself. And
I was saying this on Monday, actually. I was just saying that the further we are from a living memory, the closer we are to the next war.
I entirely agree. So look, it is a lovely photo, and on the positive, better days were ahead. But particularly, obviously, with everything that we know is going on in the world at the moment, it does sometimes feel that it's not necessarily a safer. 80 years on, it's not necessarily a safer place.
No, I think for 50 or 60 years of it probably was, but after that it's been diminishing. The Daily Mirror goes with a very different look, but still a nod to VE Day. Learn from the past, be peacemakers is on the flag, on the Mirror's flag, and it's VE Day 80 as the world remembers the end of World War II in Europe. Veterans call for peace in our war-torn times, echoing the Mirror cartoon from this day in 1945. So you can describe the cartoon for us there, Amy.
So this cartoon is really actually very famous by a cartoonist called Philip Zek, who himself was Jewish, and what we have depicted here in starkest black and white is the laurel, the sort of peace laurel being handed back to kind of Lady Europe by this dishevelled, injured, haggard soldier. The depiction, the toll of war upon his face could not be more stark, and the devastation of the kind of rubble, and there's another body in the back, another couple of bodies in the background. This is not in contrast to the Express that we were just talking about, which clearly, the colourful, the celebration, the young children, the hope for the future. This is getting a very different emotion, which is we are where we are, and thank God. But dear God, let us never get ourselves into this position again. And as I say, the cartoon is so famous, and the cartoonist worked for the cartoonist was, this is his most famous one, because obviously it was on the front page for VE, but all during the sort of late 30s and 40s, his style was just this very stark, no messing around.
Yeah, I'm not sure cartoon does it any favour, does it really?
No, it's not, because it's not. But it's the preciseness, and as I say, the sort of haggard sort of horror, and even though, as I say, it's a cartoon, it's in pen and ink. You can look at that soldier's eyes, and you can see the sort of, it's beautiful, awfulness in it. And actually, as I say, this cartoonist Philip Zek, he was a total thorn in the side. He's personally, sort of, Goebbels had great animus towards him. Hitler's propaganda chief, because this guy would just produce these pen and ink drawings, which just really got in there to the heart of this issue. And again, there was another very famous one he did of Hitler sitting, eating, having Christmas lunch by himself, and that apparently irked Goebbels so much that the cartoonist was put on a sort of a hit list for when, because obviously Germany thought they were going to invade Britain, and yes, and his talent is there for so clearly capturing this mix of emotions, certainly not all of which are as reflective of the same positivity as we saw in the Express that we were just talking about.
And I think this should always remind us as well that art in all its forms actually are incredibly important at a time of war. Musicians, songwriters, photographers, absolutely, and just these cartoons, because that would have been part of the war effort to get under Goebbels' skin.
Yes, exactly, and he was successful.
Yeah, and yet people go, oh, why do they bother teaching art at schools? And actually, art and music become even more important. The more freedoms that are taken away from a people, the more important art becomes.
And again, I'm going to put journalism, because none of these, be it whatever form of art that you're talking about, certainly back then, obviously there was no social media, so the Mirror back then had a circulation of sort of millions, and that, as you say, was incredibly important. Contributing to the national psyche, morale, the war efforts, Britain standing firm even its darkest days, the Blitz and all the rest of it. And as I say, just this simplicity of his outstretched hand holding the sort of the laurel. It's beautiful and harrowing in equal measures, and sort of makes me sort of got a bit of a chill down my spine when I sort of saw it.
And the tagline for it is "Here you are, don't lose it."
Yeah, don't lose it again.
Well, yeah. Let's take a break. Back in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, this is Talk, and it is Petrie with you, and with me is Amy Fisher, former Director of Comms for the Conservative Party. And Amy, we're looking now at the Metro, and we'll cover the Sun while we do that as well, since they are the same, sort of the same front page, really. And that is Liam Payne left a fortune. And it says of almost 30 million, but the headline is 24 million. I don't know whether I would round that up to 30 million, but there you go. Liam Payne leaves 24 million to son Bear, who is 8. He had with Cheryl Cole. Is it Tweedy? What do we call her now? Tweedy? Cole?
I think she kept cold, didn't she? Even off she.
But anyway, Liam's 24 million for son Bear, 8, so almost identical headlines. I don't know why we're talking about this.
No, so Liam Payne of One Direction, you know, Simon Cowell sort of boy band phenomenon that was sort of terribly popular. I think it was about 10 years ago, because they've split up, I think, haven't they?
Yeah, they did, yeah.
And obviously it is awful for Liam's, friends and family. So I'm not wishing to appear hurtful to their feelings when I say this, but quite literally there are far more important things.
It's an odd story to lead with.
As we just mentioned, just as we were off air there, I mean, India and Pakistan look like they might be about to launch nuclear Armageddon. So as I say, I understand for, anybody who knew this Liam Payne, that this is awful and distressing, and his death was, very much unexpected. But I think I have to say, I think it was a particularly strange editorial choice for The Sun, when, as we've just been discussing, Thursday is 80 years since the Second World War ended in Europe, and
they haven't mentioned it at all.
And it's not here anywhere. It's not on the banner. They've gone with another story there, judges, bogus asylum blitz, and then the full splash is about Liam's 24 million for son Bear, and there's no mention, in The Sun, which widely thinks of itself, as being the most patriotic, and the paper of choice for our troops and all of this kind of thing, and there's just no mention of that. It's almost like somebody just kind of got the date wrong in the calendar or something. Do you know what I mean? It almost
forgot,
it's so weirdly absent that it feels like actually there might have been, dare I say it, some sort of mistake to have no mention of it whatsoever, and then very much this kind of celebrity-based story.
It's a very strange choice, but I do think The Sun has been making some odd choices lately. But yeah, it is
particularly weird, I think.
It is particularly weird, and I was thinking, well, this is because all wills are public, aren't they? You can, every will, but he apparently died without a will, so I don't know where they found this information. It must have been made public somewhere, because they certainly haven't done journalism to dig that up. Right, let's have a look at the Telegraph now, if we can. We're slightly out of order, but So 4 million a day, the true cost of housing migrants. Asylum bill increases threefold as the EU rejects British call to help smash small boat gangs. So that's one promise that Keir Starmer cannot keep. He cannot smash the boat gangs on his own. So what does he do next? Because this is something the public will not forgive him for.
No, and I mean that was clearly shown at the local elections.
Absolutely it was,
whereby, Reform obviously won the by-election, taking over from Mike Amesbury, who was the Labour MP, had punched a constituent outside a nightclub, so there was the by-election, and then all of those council seats that Labour and, for due disclosure, the Conservatives had a wipeout too, and polling. Well, I think the result and Reform's win sort of spoke for itself, but there has been polling since which says sort of nearly 70% of people were voting Reform on the basis of this illegal migration and associated costs, and yeah, it's obviously a really big one for Keir Starmer, because it isn't going away. We've got the highest figures ever the year thus far than we have compared to last year, the year before. We are just entering into summer when the weather is better.
Where we know we're going to get more.
So there are going to be more of them.
But it feels almost, because he doesn't talk about it either.
Well, he doesn't want to, because he doesn't have anything to say.
But it just seems like they're just going, oh, well, they're going to come, so we might as well let them come. That's what it feels like, and that is something that the British public won't forgive him for.
It feels very much that they feel they're powerless on this whole issue, and then this is just an awful lot of money being spent housing people, that sort of aren't they shouldn't be here. And then, as I say, the figures are only going to increase over the next 6 months whilst the weather is better. And this story has also run straight into one that's been around for a couple of days, again after the Labour losses in the local elections last week, as to whether or not Keir Starmer was going to reverse the fuel allowance cuts from obviously last year, and people were sort of saying that they had made clear their anger about that, and actually he's turned around and said, well, no, I'm not going to reverse it. And then this runs straight into this story. Well, hang on a second, how come a bunch of people are here which don't have the right to be here when we have pensioners in fuel poverty?
Yeah. And again,
how does that seem fair?
It doesn't seem fair, and that's the thing. I mean, although to put the two together is impossible politically,
it's conflating.
It does conflate the issue, but it is still, nonetheless, if you look at the ingoing and the outgoing money, it doesn't look fair, and if it doesn't look fair, then it isn't fair to the.
No, it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck. It is a duck, and so therefore, if people are looking at this going, well, hang on a second, I'm a bit worried about, sort of fuel poverty for pensioners and whatnot, and all of this money is being spent over here that seems to be only ever spiralling. It is a huge headache. And then actually, just as another story very much hidden away right at the bottom of that front page on the Telegraph about Reeves tax rises risk 57 billion black hole. I mean, doesn't it say something about the state of the Labour government that story about a 57 billion pound black hole only comes sort of second tier to all of the other things that are going wrong with them?
I know, but I mean, this is after she was complaining about the 20 billion black hole that the Tories allegedly left behind. But the Chancellor's plans have harmed business confidence and undermined growth far more than Donald Trump's trade war. That's according to the National Institute of Economic and Social Research.
Yeah.
So a very difficult times for her, and we know what that means come October. We know what that means. She's going to have to say, times have changed, I'm putting taxes up.
Sorry about that.
Didn't want to.
Obviously didn't want to. I mean, we can hear
Russia,
it. We could write the speech.
Yeah, we could write the speech.
Anyone could, we can all literally just write the speech as we were sitting.
Yeah, we know what's coming.
Here.
We know what's coming, and then of course the complaints will be, same old Labour, same old Labour. Pakistan vows revenge for every drop of blood spilt in the bomb raid, and even leaving aside what is going on, because we're not quite sure yet between Pakistan and India why it is. They say one thing and then expand that to be partly to do with wanting to take back Kashmir and areas like that. But I was saying to my guest earlier on that this looks like a repeat really of the Israel Palestine situation. But if we even leave that aside, the effect that's going to have on British streets is something that I know the government is very worried about.
It's terrifying. We've just had, as again is covered on the Telegraph, actually, the Iranian terror cell that was taken down by the SAS on Saturday night in rather dramatic fashion, and was within hours of looking to do something quite catastrophic.
In 3 different areas, wasn't it? 8 people.
Yeah. So what's the latest, as you say, escalation between India and Pakistan? And yeah, today I was reading about it, I was sort of trying to get at, what is it, has India struck because it's revenge for a terror attack, which Pakistan was denying anyway, but then is it this centuries-old dispute about Kashmir? It's all very
Well, that's the problem, is that it's not defined, and when a war is not defined, it just escalates in the most bizarre ways.
Without
it goes into
anybody
different...
Well, this is actually what David Lammy, who I have to say has turned out to be a better Foreign Secretary than I was necessarily expecting him to be, frankly. And he was out on the airways sort of tea time round saying, with escalation, which we obviously don't want, with escalation there is a huge danger of miscalculation. So sort of in a way, if you end up in a tit for tat, I mean, tit for tat sounds like too frivolous a phrase to put on this, but if Pakistan end up in a well, you did this, so I'm coming back and retaliating here, you can sort of escalate by
ego, I call it. Escalation by ego. I want to be the last one to pop the bomb.
Escalation by kind of happenstance, not because either side necessarily had a strategic plan or strategic military geopolitical
and that's
end
the point
goal.
here.
It just sort of happened because one side did this, another side had to do that, and then everybody sort of gets themselves into a position where, to your ego point, there's no way to de-escalate, to retract without seeming and feeling like you've lost whichever side that you happen to have been on in it.
Yeah, I mean, it started really with a narrative straight away where India is saying, well, we bombed terrorist cells. India doesn't have those terrorist cells, so Pakistan bombed military installations, and then India is saying, well, hang on a minute, if you're going to bomb military installations, then we will as well.
Yeah, and then Pakistan obviously had said they weren't terrorists, they were civilians, and
of course,
you know.
So that is a major issue there, and just trying to keep those two contingents in this country from fighting it out on British streets is going to be a major problem this summer. It's going to be a major, like we saw in Leicester before. Let's take a quick break, and Amy and I'll be back in just a moment.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you and Amy Fisher, who's former Director of Comms at the Tory party. We've just actually solved the whole issue, haven't we? If only they could listen to us in between when we're on air. We just put the world to right, haven't we?
But let's be honest, some of our chat is sensible, some of it I would not want on a hot mic moment. Let's just let's be honest about that.
Let's not do it then. No, you're absolutely right. The Daily Star. I think that is a wonderful front page. That is absolutely glorious. Let me describe it. It is the Big Ben, and it is it called the Elizabeth Tower? I can't remember. Anyway, Big Ben draped with a light, with lights on it to make it look like the Union flag. And the statue of Winston Churchill, and it says never, with VE highlighted, quite clever, forget, VE Day, 80 years on, souvenir edition. That, the Sun, is how you do it.
I was just about to say, this is what I would have expected for the Sun. This, simple, covers it all, you know, has the little proud to love our forces.
Yes, and that would normally be the Sun's tagline.
Exactly. Yeah. What I was saying about them sort of wanting to be the biggest supporters of the troops. No, so what the Daily Star here is, and let's be honest, sometimes when you and I come to the Star in our paper reviews, we usually sort of slightly giggling at whatever mad Loch Ness monster photo citing nutty, sort of slightly nutty story it has. And this is not this. They have gone for just a very serious, very simple, very evocative,
it's beautiful.
You know, proud to love our forces and never forget. And they've done it beautifully, as you say.
Yeah, I think it's the best front page, actually. I really do. And interesting, today I was reading that is the statue of Winston Churchill outside Parliament. Did you two used to touch his toe?
I have done that,
you
yes,
have done
but
that.
I don't know, I never really, I just knew it was a thing that you, well, because wasn't it always in the Catholic Church, if you touch the foot of a statue of the Virgin Mary? I thought it was some weird sort of...
Maybe
I don't mean touching Winston's foot has religious connotations. I mean, there was some kind of... something had gotten twisted in touching statues' feet is good luck in some way.
That toe is much shinier.
Yes, it is, and almost sort of warm where people... as I say, I have done it a couple... You know, I have done it when I've been walking back from, you know, Parliament. I sort of did it kind of because that's what I did, but I never really quite knew what I was doing.
Why you were doing it. But I was reading today that it is going to be a criminal offence to climb...
Good.
Winston Churchill's statue.
Good. Well, there's been a couple of occasions. You know, do you remember it was a few years ago when somebody graffitied it and gave him the mohawk, the grass mohawk? I mean, come on.
Come on. Right, let's very quickly look at the FT. The FT war fears mount after Pakistan vows to hit back at India's deadly airstrikes. And then migrants face a 10-year wait to apply for residency under tougher Labour rules. Are these tough enough, these rules?
Well, I mean, it's sort of fine, but it's sort of tinkering at the edges of this wider problem that we were just talking about. The people who are here and waiting to apply for indefinite leave to remain, you know, residency, you know, they are not the ones who are the problem.
No.
The ones the problem are the ones coming here on the small boats, organised by criminal gangs. When they get here, they've arrived illegally and they just disappear into the underground. That, you know, they are not the people who come here,
visas.
who worry about getting indefinite leave to remain after a certain time period. So look, I'm not knocking it. It is something that can be tightened, but it's not going to solve the far bigger problem.
No, exactly that. It's funny because one of my producers is Italian, and she's now applied for residency, I think. Yeah, citizenship. Is that the same thing?
Indefinite, yes, I think so.
Yeah. So we're trying to block that. No, we're not. No, we're not. We love her. We're very happy to have her. She's been here for... God, I've worked with her for a long time. Let's not put a number on it. But yeah, she's been here for many, 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 many years. The Guardian, Pakistan vows to strike back. So we know that story. And a photograph there on the front. Again, no mention of VE Day
on
The Guardian. Shame on you.
I think it's pretty shocking. Yes, it's pretty shocking.
It is pretty shocking. But they are talking about there's a picture of a couple of nuns there waiting to see if the white smoke emerged, and of course it didn't. It was plumes of black smoke. And I was reading today, because I am somewhat of an idiot, anorak. I was like, how do they make that smoke black, and how do they make the smoke white?
A good question.
That's a very good question, but I've forgotten the chemical makeup of the white smoke, but they throw a chemical makeup to produce the white. But with the black smoke, what they used to do until fairly recently is that they would burn a wet straw or wet wood, because you know when you first light a fire and it's a bit damp, you get the black smoke that comes out.
They must be doing it on a sort of industrial scale, to get the...
But they've got two furnaces. They're set up in the Sistine Chapel on the floor, and they've got they look like two water butts, actually. I've got a couple in my garden, and then the pipes going into them, and they join up with one pipe, so they would like one for the black smoke and one for the white smoke. But now they use a chemical compound to make the smoke black. But I just thought, why do I want to know these things? I don't know.
My Anunnaki fact was they reckon this should take about a week to get a vote for the new Pope. But actually the longest time a conclave had to sort of sit was back in the 1200s, and it took them 3 years.
3 years, yeah. But I remember
it was quite
one
extraordinary.
that wasn't that long ago that was over a week, I'm sure.
Oh no, there was one that went on for a couple of, maybe 15, 20, well, presumably for the last Pope who's just...
Francis was picked very quickly, I think.
But I sort of have something in the back of my mind where it went on
and on and on.
It wasn't a sort of, oh look, we've been here for 5 days and now here's the new Pope.
No, I agree, and I can't remember which Pope that way. It wasn't Francis, I'm pretty sure of that. But my Italian has assured me that we will have a Pope very quickly.
Okay.
So there we go. And I think the money's on it being an Italian Pope, because they haven't had an Italian Pope for a long time. So, what about the Donald Trump as Pope? What do we think of that?
I mean, maybe he'd do sort of less harm. I don't know.
He says that
I think the idea of him being, being like the moral arbiter of anything, as we've just discussed, is sort of so farcical that kind of, fine, bring it on.
His wife apparently said he looked cute.
Well, I think we can all question what's been going on in Melania's mind, like pretty much since she married him. So, lady with a nice wardrobe, but I'm not quite sure I sort of am much interested in the rest of her views on life.
No, quite right. The Eye newspaper, a lovely picture on the Eye.
Really lovely.
A black and white photograph of VE Day, and everybody's sort of crammed. It must be somewhere in London, I would have thought, but hundreds and hundreds of people there just laughing and smiling on VE Day, and it's juxtaposed, really, I think, I hope deliberately, because it is quite startling, with the story underneath saying nuclear warning as Pakistan and India urged to step back from the brink of war. And those two images really couldn't be
more
stark, could they, together? That peace and hope, and then directly underneath it, the threat of war.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I mean, look, I sort of keep trying to comfort myself what cold comfort it is, but India and Pakistan have been quite close before in 2019.
They have.
Right, and the brink was stepped back from there. So sort of keep trying to hang on to that it is grim, but they have been able to find a way previously to de-escalate in some way. So,
and I think that the mutually assured destruction should be enough to achieve.
Well, it's a real thing. I mean, I don't think that's not just a sort of hollow threat that they can kind of be eyeballing each other with. I mean,
it really
that will happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that's a very well done front page for the Eye, in my view. The Daily Mail: Iranians plotted to attack Israeli embassy in London. I mean, the stories like this just go to prove how hard in the background, MI5 and the SAS and the police and all of those organisations are working on our behalf, and they stop way more than we ever hear.
And this is exactly. This is just a tiny tip of it, and the reality is, which the head of MI5 himself has said, is look, we obviously work hard all the time, but it only takes terrorists. They only have to be lucky once. Frankly, and frankly, it could just be luck. So I think we can be enormously proud and actually reassured by this. Yeah. I mean, it's a terrifying story, but it was stopped because we have some incredibly clever, incredibly professional, and incredibly committed people working to keep this country safe.
Yeah, I agree with you. Were you ever privy to stuff like this going on in your time?
I don't mean to sound like an idiot, but I genuinely can't.
You genuinely can't.
I genuinely.
Damn it. Which means, as a
you
journalist,
might think that I couldn't
possibly comment. No, I just wondered. Not that I wanted you to talk about specifics, but just sometimes being somebody with knowledge and knowing that other people don't have that knowledge is incredibly difficult as well. And I was relating that not to these people who work in this field, but also to governments and in some cases journalists as well. When we're told things, we're privy to information that we can't use.
Serious people who make personal sacrifices actually in their own lives, as I say, to keep the rest of us safe. So
yeah, just remember that they're
there. Exactly.
Yeah. The Times. Again, nothing on VE Day.
No. Well, look, the Mail did. I mean, let's not let the Mail off. The Mail
no, that's
didn't
true. The Mail
have
haven't got anything either. They're preferring to put a picture of the Beckhams. Beckham's dismay. Some family. Who cares? Don't care.
Exactly.
I literally don't care. But nothing about VE Day. It's an odd editorial decision. I don't get it. The Times did the same thing. I think on Tuesday. No pictures of what had happened on the Monday. I thought again, the Sun at least did, but I mean maybe they think one front page a week is enough. I don't. I think that we need to have done that. So the Times not mentioning that, but a beautiful picture of the Sistine Chapel nonetheless, which is stunning. I've seen it. It's tiny though, much smaller than you think. And a story underneath that: all migrants will have to be fluent in English. This is another tightening under Sir Keir Starmer. So there we go. Amy, thank you so much for coming in. Always a pleasure. Thank you. Amy Fisher there. Right, coming up, I want to talk to you about Neighbours. Like I said, not that programme. I haven't watched that for a very long time, although I did used to enjoy it, I have to be honest with you. Right, but I'm talking about your neighbours and neighbourhood disputes. There are so many now in the newspaper. They make it into the newspapers. Moan about a neighbour's fence backfires. This is the latest today, as couples are ordered to rip up their patio and take out their heating because the judge spotted something that shouldn't have been there. Other people end up with hundreds of thousands of pounds of legal bills and have to sell the homes they've been fighting over just to pay them. So I want to hear about your punch-ups, well, not literally or physically, with your neighbours. Let me know if you've ever got into a dispute and how that went for you. Give me a call. I look forward to talking to you in just a moment.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good morning to you. It is Thursday already, can you believe it? And I want to talk to you because I've just noticed that I read all the papers every day that I'm in work. So I go through all of them. I'm very lucky that I can speed read. But anyway, I read all the papers every day, and I sort of noticed, popping up all the time are these neighbourhood disputes that just seem to go absolutely wild. They just go way too far. I just don't know how they get that bad. And I've lived next door to somebody for 22 years who could be very sweet actually, but most of the time was extremely annoying and used to do. I absolutely swear down that she used to take a panel out of the fencing in between our back gardens and go into my back garden and cut down plants and things, and just odd bits of behaviour like that. And she always sounded like she meant well, but it was never. It was just wrong. Everything was wrong, and we did end up falling out, not in any dramatic, screaming, shouting way. But I do remember saying to her, "Please don't talk to me ever again, and in fact don't even look at me. I can't do this anymore." I think that was about 18 years in, when I tried to be generous, whilst at the same time occasionally being petty, because she used to mark out her parking space, and she was so. This is the weird thing. She was so desperate to keep this parking space that she wouldn't use her car. I mean, literally, think about that just for a second. She didn't want to lose the parking space, so she wouldn't drive her car. Why have a car? I mean, if you take that to its logical conclusion. Occasionally when she'd move out of the space, I'd just move in. I would be busy doing something else, and I'd see that she'd gone out for the day and think, right, I'm going to go out and move my Mini. Just because it wasn't her parking space. It was a public road, for goodness sake. But anyway, that's how petty it can sometimes get. But I would have stopped short of a lawsuit, because you start to get to court, and the story that today that I thought, right, this is the universe is telling me something about stories and things that are coming around. This is an accountant who claimed her neighbour's new fence interfered with her garden picnics, has been ordered to rip out the patio and the central heating system at her cottage. So she complained about the fence, it went to court, and the judge said, now hang on a minute, what we've noticed is that your patio's illegal and so is your heating. So the pipe or something encroaches on the neighbour's land. So that you've got to rip those out. So it's going to end up costing an absolute fortune over a fence. And I remember with my neighbour, she moaned. I mean, it must have been for 12, 15 years about the fence in between us. Oh, it's rotten, it's going to fall down, da da da. And I didn't want to get into an argument with her about who was going to pay for the fence, so I thought I'll just get a new fence put up. So I paid, I think it was £1,000 or something to have a new fence put in, and I had a proper fence put in. Not one of these ones with panels that could be removed by my next door neighbour. So I had one, a solid wood fence that went, there were no breaks in it, no way of removing things. And she called the council after about 15 years of complaining about this fence. And so she called the council and complained that I'd put a fence up that was too tall. And I could hear her in her garden going, oh God, oh my God, literally at the top of her lungs going, oh, I can't see anything, it's so dark. Absolute madness, right? Which I ignored. And anyway, the council came around, they measured the fence, they went, no, it's perfectly fine. It's fine. It's all right. See you. And apparently she'd said, don't tell them it was me. Don't tell her it was me that complained. And I thought, who else would have complained? I mean, what, somebody 2 streets away who wouldn't even know there was a fence there? Anyway, so it was that sort of relationship. It went on. This went on honestly for 20 years until I completely ignored her. But we didn't go to court, and I don't think we would have done. I don't think it would have gone that far. She'd sort of isolated and alienated everybody in this little tiny street that I lived in. But I didn't move because of her. I moved because I wanted to downsize. But these people have completely ruined their own lives by complaining about a fence. And the reason they complained about the fence, the neighbour had the absolute right to put the fence up, but they said because that fence was there, they couldn't carry a metre-long tray with drinks on it without bumping into the fence. And that was their argument. And I thought, well, why don't you just get a smaller tray and do 2 journeys? Don't be lazy. But no, they wanted to have a fight about it. There's other stories that are around as well. A man's bitter £300,000 4-year battle with a painter neighbour over a 4-foot wide stream. This is an artisan potter has beaten his painter neighbour in a £300,000 test case court battle over who owns a brook dividing their gardens in a quintessential English village. Britain's worst neighbour. Do you remember this? This was recently jailed for tearing the roof off of a home in a bitter dispute over a garden fence, and he tore the tiles off his own roof and threw them onto the ground, and he also pulled up some of the neighbours as well. But I mean, he destroyed his own property over a fence, and I just want to know why it is that these things get so bad, and whether you've ever had a neighbourhood dispute. Have you ever fallen out with a neighbour, and how bad did it get? Let me know, because these stories are absolutely everywhere. Wheelie bin wars, neighbour from hell's 3-year campaign of bullying in a dispute about where the wheelie bins should go. 3 years of bullying and fighting over I mean, seriously, why do they get so bad? Give me a call, 0344 499 1000. We've all got neighbours, well, most of us have got neighbours, particularly if you live in a town or a city. I mean, how are we all meant to get on with them? What has been going on? We've all had these moments, so please do ring and share yours. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. Nigel has called from here in London. Hi, Nigel.
Good evening to you. I haven't seen you for a little while.
No, how are you?
Doing pretty good, thanks. How are you?
Good,
You well?
Very well, thank you, yeah.
Good. Well, you're looking very radiant on my screen.
Oh, thank you. That'll be the yellow shirt, I think. I'll probably do that. So tell me about, I mean, living in London is hard enough, right? But we are cheek by jowl.
We are. No, I'm pretty, I suppose, fortunate in respect that my neighbours are a pretty reasonable bunch.
Right.
But we've got some new neighbours who've moved in next door. They're not overly pally. So we have an issue, as I was saying to your co-worker just now, where we've got a lot of foliage coming into our garden. And what we're going to do, we've just written them a letter to say that we're going to cut all of this back and remove it. And there's quite a lot of it. It's about 45, 50 feet in length. There's quite a lot. It's a bit like a sort of, I don't know, a forest, if for want of a better phrase, or a heathland. So I've written them a letter to say that we're going to cut it all back. And there's 2 opportunities here. One, for us to cut it back and just chuck it back into your garden. Or B, if you get your own contractor in, come and chop it back and remove it yourself. Now, legally, we're allowed to cut it back.
Yes, you are. As long as you return all the cuttings to your neighbour.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we're just being polite and being neighbourly in doing that to avoid any form of issue. And then we're going to buy 30 willow ossia trees, which grow at the rate of 100 centimetres a year. They're pretty quick to grow. They're full height of 7 metres. And we've just written to the council to say we're going to put those in. And is there any objection? So we're giving everyone fair notice and fair warning. And I sincerely hope that it's an amicable solution. I'm sure it will be, but I think it's far better to sort of try and lay out the ground rules before.
Yeah, I mean that is always the worry, isn't it? Is when you see that for sale sign go up. You know, and you've had a really sort of calm existence for many years, and then suddenly your neighbour is moving, and you don't know who you're going to get in next.
Of course.
And I think this is how they do escalate. But I mean, have you tried the bottle of wine on the doorstep? And
well, we haven't done yet. Perhaps we should leave some wine or some biscuits. I don't know.
Yeah.
From Fulton and Mason. I don't know. But I just think that. Some people want to be friendly, some people want to keep themselves to themselves, and that's their prerogative, But they're nice neighbours. They aren't bad neighbours.
Yeah.
They're not playing blaring music at 3 a.m. and they say, "Well, I want to know why I wasn't invited to the party." but they're a young couple, and we wish them well. But I think that you've got to try and be amenable and try and play the game and communicate, so they can't say, "Well, you never told us that."
Yeah.
And suddenly we've got a whole garden full of rubbish. Why didn't you let us know?
Yeah, I mean, I just had a building, an art studio I just built, not me myself personally, at the very bottom of my garden. I'm very lucky in West London. I've got quite a long garden. But before I did that, I went to the neighbours and said, "Look, I'm thinking of doing this. Is that okay with you?" Even though I had to apply for planning as well, I just wanted to do the right thing and say, "Look, this is what I'm looking at. This is what it's going to look like from your bedroom windows or whatever. Do you have any objections to this, or would you like me to change anything before I go for planning permission?" Because it's on a raised platform, and I thought that was the better way of doing it.
Of
as
course,
well.
of course.
Yeah.
No, I think so. Communication is always a key, and that way, no one can turn and say, "Well, you never told us, did you?"
Yeah, exactly, and I think it does matter to communicate well. But when you read these stories, Nigel, of people who spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on legal fees, what on earth?
I can't understand how it gets to such a deep-rooted, ugly, toxic situation where it just rumbles on and rumbles on. There's clearly no element of common sense where people can just meet, chat, sit down and try and sort it out, because there's only one winner. It's the lawyers.
It's the lawyers. Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder if there should be forms of media. Are there forms of neighbourly mediation? I would have thought there would be.
Well, I don't know, but I'll tell you something interesting. We have a flat in town that we rent out, and it's owned by Westminster Council. It's a fantastic little property. If we have to do anything to it, we have to send out a letter to the neighbour to the left, the neighbour to the right, above and below, to say, "We are doing this X, Y, Z. We've got permission from Westminster Council as a courtesy to let you know there may be a bit of banging and noise between certain times and certain times. Any objections? And here's my email and phone number." So they try and arrest it in that way to try and at least allow some form of mediation or communication, I presume would be the right word, communication between neighbours. And you know what? None of them have ever said don't do it. And none of them. Only one person has replied and said, "Fantastic, I wish you well. Let's see what the new kitchen looks like." So
isn't that cool? That's so nice. It's so nice. But again, I do think it is about communication. I think some people feel like my old neighbour felt very possessive. She thought she owned the street and certainly her parking space. It was that. Yeah. But that's because she'd been there for a very long time, much longer than I'd been there. I think she bought the house for $7,000 back in the 70s or something. So she'd been there a lot longer than me, and she was older than me. But it is communication. But some people just don't want to listen.
No, they don't, and they just want to fight, and I'm sure that I know that the story you're talking about. I just think it's like when other neighbours build these huge basements, and it creates problems. And we had one in our road about a basement. It turned out the house next to it nearly fell in, but thankfully it didn't. But they resolved that very, very quickly. But these problems just manifest themselves. They roll along, they gather momentum and speed, and before you know, it's out of control.
Yeah, I mean, and it's actually, I think, the legal profession are culpable on this. They should never let it But then they wouldn't earn the big money, would they? But they should never let it get to that. It shouldn't be allowed to get to that position where, you know, hundreds of thousands of pounds. And maybe there should be some legislation that says, you know, if you're arguing over a fence, the maximum amount of money you can spend arguing over that is 500 quid.
Exactly. Now, do you enjoy creosoting your new fence?
Actually, I'm really lucky because I've moved, so that's somebody else's problem now, and all of my new garden is all brick wall. So, so I don't need to creosote anything. But yeah, no, it was a miserable job painting that thing, I can tell you, because it was quite long. Nigel, it's lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for calling in. Good luck with your trees.
Oh, thank you. I'll send you a picture in 7 years when they're about 25 foot tall.
Yeah, and also when you've spent £500,000 arguing with your neighbour over it. Take care, Nigel. Thank you very much indeed. So do give me a call. Tell me about what's going on with your neighbours. We've all had bad neighbours. I know we have. And maybe you had a really good one. I don't know, but I'd love to hear from you. Give me a call, 0344 499 1000. You can also message me, put the word talk and your message to 87222.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, and it's Petrie here with you. Excuse me. And we're talking about neighbours because it appears that we're not very good at it. We're not very good at being good neighbours because there are so many stories around at the moment about how many people just go too far. Literally, it's every week, if not twice a week now. There's some story about an argument about a fence or an inch of ground or something that has happened that escalates beyond any reasonable level and can end up costing hundreds of thousands of pounds in legal fees as people literally argue over a fence. And I want to know, first of all, I don't have any understanding of how I mean, I even had a really annoying neighbour for 20 odd years, but it would never have escalated, I don't think, to that point. But it's still, nonetheless, it does. But maybe you've had a neighbourhood dispute, an issue with a neighbour. Were you able to solve it? I mean, I don't think there are many things that can't be solved with a bottle of wine. I really don't. Just knock on the door and go, right, come on, this has gone on far enough now. Let's just have a glass of wine and chat about this. I genuinely think that is possible to do. Although I'm being a bit of a hypocrite because I ended up telling my neighbour not to talk to me or even look at me ever again. So I don't, maybe I am being a hypocrite, but surely there's no need for it to go this far. But with so many of us crammed into so small spaces, particularly those living in cities, if you're in a block of flats, all you need is some noisy kids running up and down or screaming, or, I mean, I had a neighbour like that for a little amount of time, thank goodness not for very long. But, it is enough to drive you around the bend, and you can't get away from it. You can't move away from it. So how do you, well, you can, but you have to tell people that you've had a row with your neighbour in the last 2 years, I think it is. Do you see why I said don't look at me or talk to me? Anyway, so I'd like to hear from you. Tell me, have you always got on with your neighbours? Have you always found a way through? Or have you had a time when it's just been unthinkably awful? Give me a call, 0344 499 1000, and you can text me as well with your message if you use the word talk first and then 87222. The couple of messages that I wanted to read here. Me and my neighbour struck up a relationship when I left the army. The relationship lasted 5 years. She ended it as she met someone else, and we still live as next door neighbours. Oh God. No, that's awful. Yeah, and now we don't really get on. Go figure. I know she'd like me to move, but I'm going nowhere. Isn't there something to be said about messing on your own doorstep? Isn't there a phrase? Never at work and never a neighbour. I think that's a rule somewhere. But I feel for you, Craig. That is tough. Oh God, that's awful. Thank goodness you didn't move in together. I suppose you didn't need to because you were living next door. This one, I won't read the name because I've been asked not to. I could discuss problems with my neighbour for hours. It started even before I moved in. In the first few nights of living here, my neighbour hammered on my kitchen window 11:30 at night, caught on camera. She then put letters through my door telling me to move. I then got her moving my wheelie bill into the middle of my drive to make it awkward to drive in. I then started getting visits from counsellors asking me what I was doing. Then police visits started with strange accusations. Police realised I was doing nothing. The last visit was 6 weeks to inspect an ornament on my kitchen window. A cow patch pepper grinder, she said, was a camera. What? I have had posts on social media accusing me, a 60-plus professional lady, of stalking her and filming her. The latest is a council letter last week accusing me of loud music after 11 p.m. every night while I'm in bed listening to talk on Alexa. Maybe I should be a bit quieter. I sought mediation after 2 years, but she doesn't obey the agreement. I retired 2 years ago, battling cancer, and really don't need the harassment and stress. No organisation is helping me. It's coming up to 7 years now. And if I wanted to move, I couldn't because of the problems. Any suggestions? I'm in Teesside, but don't say my name for legal reasons. I mean, can't you flip the script on her? And sue her for harassment? Mind you, it costs money, doesn't it? But get a cease and desist from the council or from the courts. I don't know how much these things cost, but that's probably the route I would go, is some form of cease and desist. And if you've got records of all these times that you've been harassed by her, then it shouldn't be that difficult to get. Keep a diary. That's always what everyone says, isn't it? Keep a diary of the times and any other evidence you can gather. If you've got a camera on your phone and she's harassing you, just turn it on to record and at least record her voice harassing you. Keep those clips and play them to the police. I think the important thing at this point is to get the evidence together. That's what everyone has always said has helped them. And you just get the evidence that she's the one harassing you. The police will have a list of the times that they've been called out to check you for some reason. And the council will as well, because the person I've been talking about is on a council list for being somebody who phones every day about some nonsense or other. I mean, I remember getting a knock on the door from the police saying, oh, we're really concerned about the level of drug dealing that goes on in the Mews. And I went, sorry? And he said, we've had lots of complaints that drug dealers come down here, because it was sort of a dogleg off a main road. And I said, no, they don't. And he said, well, no, we've been told that they're always in here drug dealing and, you know, using the street as a toilet. And I said, that simply isn't true. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, you know. I come home late from work some nights or early mornings. I don't see anything like what you're suggesting. And so the reason I'm telling you that is because eventually it does get registered somewhere that there's too many phone calls coming from one person making complaints, and you can possibly use that to get a cease and desist. That's probably what I would do. It must be awful for you as well, though, if you've got cancer and you're battling that and you've got that nonsense going on next door. But I suspect that's, I don't know if that's probably your only thing, is to get her to stop. Listen, give me a call, 03444 991 1000. Time now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning a weekend away in Munich at the end of May to watch the biggest game in European football, which of course is the Champions League final. And we're also putting £5,000 in your pocket to spend any way you like.
Win a once-in-a-lifetime trip to watch the Champions League final live. Go to talksport.com/win for your chance to embark on the ultimate odyssey of football ecstasy. With 2 tickets to the Champions League final live at the iconic Munich Football Arena, Germany, including flights, accommodation, and an uber-massive £5,000 in your hand. How about that? Enter online now at talksport.com/win. Terms and conditions apply. Achtung, baby.
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win that VIP trip, simply text the word football to 83338 by the 16th of May, 11 p.m. A text will cost you £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have bill payer's permission, or you can just send your name and number by post to Champions League Final Comp, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. It must arrive by 5 p.m. on May the 21st.
So there you go. Don't miss out on that incredible giveaway from our colleagues at Talk Sport. And very good luck to you. So, wheelie bin wars. A mother of 3 was subjected to a campaign of misery, bullying and intimidation by her nightmare neighbour over a dispute about wheelie bins and parking. Barry, 46, and Faye, 45, moved into their home in a quiet street in Cheshire in 2004, but soon endured misery at the hands of Susan, who was 69 years old, who lived next door. The ongoing row saw her blocking their drive with her car and placing her blue bin in front of their motor before a furious bust-up was caught on camera. What is it with these single old ladies? I'm sorry to be, you know, sort of generalise, but that was the same with me, with my neighbour, and they're just a bit bored. Oh, Paul, thank you. The lady from Teesside, if you're still listening, which I'm sure you are, can ask a solicitor to seek an order against her neighbour under the Prevention from Harassment Act 1997. Such an order can have a power of arrest attached. And that's from Paul in Fleet. So if you're still listening in Teesside, go get a solicitor and seek an order against your neighbour under the Prevention from Harassment Act 1997. And that could have the power of arrest. And I think that's probably what you've got to do. And you've got evidence, like I was saying. And if you haven't, spend the next 6 months gathering that evidence. They take photographs every time she moves your bin, and date it. Mind you, they're probably all dated now, aren't they, if you're taking the picture on your phone. Anytime she speaks to you, record it. Any letter that you get from her, keep it. Any visits from the police, ask them for a notification that they've come to see you. They'll give you one. So gather all those bits of evidence, then go to a solicitor and say, right, this has been going on for 7 years, but I didn't keep the evidence, or maybe you did, but here is the last 6 months. Can we please get this order and then just have a letter sent to her. I think the days of a glass of wine and getting on and making friends probably not going to happen. I don't think. But so the next thing the only thing you can do now is just stop her from harassing you. And also, if the solicitor, you need to make it clear to the solicitor, the council, and the police that you are battling cancer and that she's making you even more ill. And a trigger statement is that it is affecting your mental health, because that's a massive trigger statement to councils, police, and to the law. So that is your way out of this horrible situation. But I really do feel for you, because there's not a lot you can do if somebody's a bit, troubled living next door, is there? Right, I'm going to take a quick break, but I will be back in a moment. Do give me a call, 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good morning. We're talking about horrible neighbours, because I've got a pile of stories in front of me of when it's gone horribly wrong. And I know that neighbours can be a right pain. My neighbours now are lovely, by the way. They're very, very nice. And we don't really have much to do with each other. I mean, we say hello, and it's nice, and I know that if ever I was in any trouble, I could go and knock on their door. If I'm planning to have a council pickup of rubbish that I have to pay for, and I'm planning to go and ask a few of them if they've got any large items they want to get rid of, and I'll pay to have them taken away in my bundle, because I haven't got any. So it's that kind of street that I live in, and having downsized and moved, I didn't move very far away because I love the area, but it's just really nice to have. I didn't realise how much actually my neighbour had impacted me. It was always like, oh God, what's going to happen today? What's going to happen next? What's going to happen? And now I'm where I am. It's so calm. It is so calm. It's lovely. So quiet and calm. And they're all lovely, and we say hello. And if I need, we all take in each other's parcels. If I'm at home largely during the day, so I'm very happy to take in people's parcels. They take in stuff for me as well, which is absolutely brilliant. So it's that sort of neighbourhood. That's what you want. What you want is neighbours who are lovely, and they're all lovely, and I can say hello, how are you, and oh, isn't your dog looking lovely, and we have a little chat. But we don't there's none of that. There was no lines that are overstepped. Like was it Graham who said that he had a relationship with someone who lived next door, and after 5 years they broke up, and now they're just awkwardly living next door to each other. I mean, that's got to be, that's got to be difficult. But I always think that once you start socialising with neighbours, that you can cross a line. So I might invite them round for a glass of wine one Sunday or summer afternoon, but then again I might not. Just in case, because then, you know, I want my neighbours to be friendly, but not necessarily to be friends, if that makes sense to you. That's sort of where I come from on it. Andrew has sent a message saying our neighbours used to complain about noise, music and partying when they had very young children. Granted, sometimes it could be past the watershed, but they once knocked on our door asking us to keep the noise down at 6:30 on a Friday evening. I mean, that's always the dread, isn't it, is children moving in next door. And I remember when I moved in to this little mews that and the reason I keep saying it is because it was a little cul-de-sac, and they're very strange because people don't tend to move very often from there. And I was there for 20 odd years, and people don't tend to move that often in little tiny areas like that. And so I was the first one who moved in to the street with a child, as a single mother with a child. So I think I was definitely, it was like, oh no, there's a child living, it's all gonna change. So I was the first one with a child, and I was the first one with a dog as well. So I don't know whether I was particularly popular there myself, but I kept myself to myself. I didn't really socialise at all. But still, with children, it can be really difficult. And as my son grew up, of course, my neighbour then started to. That's when I really got my back up. She would accuse him of one time she said he vandalised her car. And what had happened is the rear windscreen wiper had been flipped out. So it wasn't even broken. She thought it was broken. And she said, I said, first start, he wouldn't do that. Secondly, it's not broken, look. And I just sort of pushed it back in. But honestly, it was just constant. It was all stuff like that all the time. And she'd call the police on him. It was awful. It was horrible, 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 horrible. Just nastiness, just all the time. And it can be a bit draining, but now where I am, it's just delightful. Makes such a difference. It really does. So I'd love to hear from you. It's very quiet on the phones tonight. Very quiet. Maybe you're all asleep, being good neighbours, listening to the radio on Alexa very quietly, and being very quiet. This is Craig. It wasn't Greg. It was Craig. Craig, who lived next door to, had a relationship with his neighbour for 5 years, and then they broke up, and they still live next door to each other. Craig says, "I blame COVID, as I didn't want a relationship. One thing led to another." You see, COVID's got a lot to answer for, and I can imagine that. You're a bit bored. You can't meet anyone else, right? Bored, lonely. Next door neighbour. Why not? And now you're stuck with that. The consequences, just consequences. And has she got a new fella, did you say? She's got a new boyfriend. Who broke up with who? And how awkward was it when you first broke up? And do you hide when you oh, so many questions. Do you hide when, do you wait until she's left the house before you leave and stuff like that? Or is it fine? Is it okay? Actually, give me a call, tell me. David said, my neighbours are brilliant. My next door neighbour and I had an antisocial incident when these kids thought it was funny to damage both our houses. The other neighbours in the street rallied round and fixed the damage. It's like a mini community. Well, that's nice. Whereabouts are you though, David? I can't see that happening in London. And the trouble with London is that it's very transient. Lots of people move in and out all the time. So it's very difficult to try and make friends, even if you wanted to. People do move a lot. The person from Teesside has contacted me again and saying, I have loads of evidence that I presented to the police last year, and they said I could prosecute. I was asked to defer it as the lady has issues, and could I have some empathy? However, I feel she knows what she's doing. I think Paul is correct, and I need to protect myself from this harassment as it is making me ill now. Yeah, I think Paul is right. I think you go the next route, right? I think you do that. I think you go to a solicitor and get a letter, because if the police are not going to do anything or say, can you be a bit compassionate? Well, she's not being very compassionate to you. So I think you do need to go to a solicitor, keep that evidence, show that evidence, go to a solicitor. I mean, I don't know what your financial situation is. It might cost you a couple of £100 for a letter. I don't know. And then just get it done and make sure that she can't harass you anymore. Because if you've got cancer and you're not very, that's awful. If you're trying to recover, if you're not very well. My neighbour was harassing me when I was diagnosed with MS. And that was really tough at that point. But I didn't want to tell her that I was diagnosed, because it was none of her blooming business. So I just had to deal with it myself. But there's no reason for you to deal with it. I think you need to definitely go and see a lawyer and get that sorted out. It's very difficult, isn't it, when you live where you live and you don't want to move and you want to have a peaceful life. That's all we ever want. And somebody treating you like that, it can make all the difference. So give me a call. 0344 499 1000. Quick break, back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning to you. We were talking about neighbourhood disputes, and I'm just reading this, Britain's worst neighbour. I had no idea. So this is the guy recently who tore the roof off his neighbour's home following a bitter dispute over a garden fence. And he actually caused more than £200,000 worth of damage to both her property and his property over offence. He got sentenced to prison, actually, for it. But, I mean, you've got to really lose your marbles to do that over a fence. It's a 7-year dispute between neighbours, which started when a fence panel fell down. After a new fence was erected to separate their gardens, the two neighbours disagreed over where the boundary was. That led to years and years of litigation. Unbelievable. Henry has called from Rugby. Hi, Henry.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Can you believe that? A fence panel.
I know. But I just want to say, I think a lot of these issues are to do with neurotypical people with non-typical people, because I'm autistic and everything, all that sort of stuff. But I think if you are neurotypical, I think you understand. You think that a boundary is a boundary, and that's fine. That but if you are autistic, I think sometimes you feel that your sort of house is your castle, and how dare you interfere with my area, and there's a boundary. And I think the problem is that in the UK we are packed together. We are too closely attached to each other, and we are sort of, the boundary is the boundary. And some people feel the boundary is a bit flexible, and some people feel the boundary is like a very hard thing. And I think if you are non-typical in your thinking, I think you can maybe exaggerate how things are hurting you in the way that you feel about things. And I'm not saying that a lot of the things that you've said are perfectly acceptable, in that I do think some people that are autistic do go over the top about things. But I think sometimes the problem is that we're too packed together.
Do you know what, Henry? That's a really interesting take on the situation, and I think I hadn't thought about it in that way. And you're probably right that for me, I am a bit kind of like, so what? It's only an inch or whatever. But as you said, if somebody is very particular, even with OCD or any, those non-typical neuropathic issues, that you would then become fixated. On your fence or on your boundary.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mildly autistic, but I know. I mean, I'm on that edge where I'm mildly autistic, but also I understand non-autistic ways, and so I can see that some of my autistic traits are not typical of things, and so I can see that I used to have a house and and a fence and everything, and if somebody cut some of the vines that were coming over my fence, I'd be like up in the wall. I'd be like, oh my God,
really?
They're coming into my area. How dare they come into my area? But all they were doing was cutting some of the sort of plants that were falling over, growing over my fence. But for me, it was a big thing. It was like, oh my God, how dare they interfere with my area? That's the way I thought about it.
That's
but I can
fascinating.
also see that actually it's just them cutting their vines, cutting their honeysuckle or whatever it is,
That's really interesting, because I hadn't really thought about it from that point of view, because I always think, well, I can just cut it. But if you are somebody who, I can see that. I can see that.
So for me, it's an invasion. For me, it's like, how dare you interfere with my life, with my boredom, with my fence goes up. My fence doesn't go up 6 feet. It goes up to the sky,
Yeah.
And so how dare you come over me? And I can understand, I'm not that sort of person, but it would disturb me while it's being cut, but it wouldn't disturb me afterwards. But I can understand some other people taking it further and taking it to like the council or whatever, and just going over the top and sending notes and being angry about it. But that's, I think a lot of what you've said this evening sounds to me like neurotypical people against non-typical people. These people who are like give names to cats and like screaming cat names out in the gardens, or like you know what I mean. Like they're sort of like saying, "How dare you touch my fence or, grow a tree up or that sort of thing. And I think it's more about the UK being, compact in how we build houses. We're building houses where you really have to be very protective over the land you have.
I think this is really interesting. So if you and I were neighbours and I wanted to cut back because your plant was growing, over my side or whatever it was, what would be the best thing for me to do? Would that be to knock on your door and say, Henry, look, I hope you don't mind. Is it okay if? Would that?
No.
No, that wouldn't help.
No, as an autistic person,
wow.
My autism would think I don't want communication with you. If you sent a note, that would probably be the best thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you came to my door and confronted me, the confrontation of you communicating directly with me at my front door would be a bit, and I wouldn't know how to process it so quickly enough to... but if you sent a note, I would be able to read the note, think about the note. Okay, yeah, I can have after a couple of hours, I'll be going, okay, I understand this now. And then I can watch. I would literally sit and watch you cut the hedge. but that's how my mind works. That's how autistic minds work.
That's really interesting because, again, I would have thought me knocking on the door would have been the most polite thing to do and say, hi, it's your neighbour being all lovely. But you would see that as a confrontation.
Yeah, I would see that as very... It'd be a lot of... It's like you giving all of your information for a year, feeding it to me straight away. It's like all this information, too much.
It would be too much.
Too much. So to be too much for me personally, as an autistic guy, be too much information. And so I would need to have a letter so I could digest the information, and then I would watch the head being cut. And so that's how it works. But so if you didn't do that, if you presented yourself at the door and said, and then you went off thinking, oh, that's great, I've spoke to my neighbour, and so I would then see you cutting the hedge, and I'd be frustrated. I'd be like, not angry, but just violated the feeling.
Wow.
If you were hurting my boundary. It sounds awful, I know.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It kind of makes sense. And I think, looking at some of these stories, when you think, how has this escalated to this level? How has this got to this point where people...
But I think this is why, because I think it's non-neural people not understanding the sort of communication they're getting from other neighbours. That's why...
And can you ever see a time... So Paul Ross is just waving at me with two fingers through the window. Can you ever see a time where it would escalate with you, though, to a point of being a legal situation?
Maybe. I've had a situation where it nearly got to that.
No.
It nearly got to that, and I'm on the mild edge. I mean, I'm like good. I'm successful in business, and I've had a good life. Most autistic people don't get, struggle to get that far. But it. So maybe, but the people who are more vulnerable autistically, they might take it a legal way, because autistic people don't go communication to communication. They rather go to authority, because authority, they can send letters and send, and
they're more distant.
Yeah, it's a more distant way of communicating rather than being face to face. It's a more easier way for them to do that.
That's really interesting. Very interesting, Henry. Thank you. That gives me really food for thought. So thank you very much indeed. This message here says as well, because of the configuration of my garden, I have 6 neighbours and I own the fence between 4 of them.
Oh, God.
I know. They seem to think they can paint and attach anything to it on their side, but this is criminal damage. Did you know that? Paul Ross is in the studio with me.
I thought you could do what you liked if it was on your side of the fence in your garden.
No, if you own the fence... The person on the other side of the fence can't attach anything to it or even paint it.
So you could write the so-and-so's at number 40,
Yeah.
so merchant bankers, and they couldn't paint over it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you could put.
I did hear
really
somebody
nasty
a
on
while
that.
ago, and whether this was apocryphal or not, they'd altered their Wi-Fi code to the people at number 72, and it was a rude word.
Really?
So anybody going by with their phones and was told there's Wi-Fi off, what's people at number 72?
Because they were probably stealing it before.
Yeah, well, I presume so.
Are you a good neighbour?
I'd like to think I am. I had a terrible dispute with a couple, not so just drip of attrition. I moved to a place called Bisham with wife number 3, it would have been. She was a lucky woman, she got out early. But there's a guy, he had 3 cars, OK?
Yeah.
Parking was an issue, and he had a garage. Right,
Yeah.
one garage. But whenever he went away, and he only really used one car to go into Waitrose on a Saturday to buy the stuff that had been reduced to buy, he got like 2 metal poles and a bit of rope, and he tried to keep that one parking space.
I hate that.
And
My neighbour used to do it with
it was a
cones.
country lane.
Yeah.
And with a donkey sanctuary one side. It's not like suddenly you're going to influx of tourists, and it drove us mad. And then one night somebody, not me, but I know who it was, but I can't grasp them up, threw his stuff over into the fence, and then it was all bets were off. He wouldn't speak to anyone. In the end, we moved because of it, because that one person and the 2 of them had kind of done that kind of mutually reinforcing paranoia thing, and we just thought, I just don't want to be around
And you
him.
moved because of
Well,
them?
because I'd see him in the pub and say hello to him, and all the other, oh, you shouldn't talk to him. I thought, I can't live in this, patent place. It was like without the sex.
No, we used to.
Back on the marriage, that is, isn't it? I shouldn't say that.
We used to have my neighbour that I was I've been talking about. I moved about 3 years ago, not because of her, but for other reasons. But 22 years of this. But she used to put cones out for her parking space.
Yeah.
And I used to just steal them.
Yeah.
Or
Mission theft from an award-winning broadcaster.
Yeah.
The other thing I remembered is this house had...
Well, she stole them. Nobody owns
so no,
cones, do they?
That's true.
She's nicked them from somewhere.
And then I'd rest the case for the defence. The house I had there was built in the 12th century. It had a flying freehold. So our bedroom was over the neighbour's kitchen.
Right.
And the chap next door is now sadly passed away. A lovely retired English school music teacher said, you might want to come down, he said, and maybe get Mrs. Ross to play some music so you can know the sound level so we're not hearing... And he was basically saying, if you're dancing the horizontal mambo, there's a noise level after which we might hear you and we don't embarrass you, which is quite nice, wasn't it? Now, that's a good neighbour.
That is a good neighbour. I mean, these flying freeholds I sounded very grown up the other day when my producer was looking at a house, and I said, I think you'll find that's probably... You want to check and see if that's a flying freehold? And she was like, I've never heard of that before. And I went, oh.
My then wife was working for EA Entertainment, of course, an American company, and the actor come over and they come out to us. We were in Henley, this place called Bisham Abbey, and you mean this place was built in like 1142? And they're thinking, America, Columbus didn't set us out before, they couldn't get their head right, and it's still standing. Yeah, it's all true, it's all right. We built it last in those days, matey. But we did find out the bottom half of it, the ground floor, was where in the winter, it was a peasant's cottage. They bring all their animals in to keep them. They lived upstairs. The smell from down below must have been right.
It must have been terrible.
Yes.
Well, now you've got animals in your house. You've got a big dog, haven't you?
I have, and I've got 3 grandchildren. I've got a new baby boy grandson.
Oh,
Little
congratulations.
Frank Ross, yes. My daughter Bibi and her lovely husband Charlie, we had a little boy Frank. So
Frank, that's a good
We'll
name.
make him sleep downstairs.